Hey my dear listener, before we start, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Comment down where are you from and what's your time right now. Let's jump into the video. Story 1. Born to the soil, a medieval peasant's life from cradle to grave. You are born without ceremony. No record marks the day. No written name announces your arrival to the world. You come into existence on a dirt floor, inside a low wooden hut, somewhere in rural England or France, or perhaps deep within the patchwork countryside of the Holy Roman Empire. Your mother labors through the pain without a trained healer. The women of the village, if they are available, assist with what knowledge has been passed down by memory alone. Survival is uncertain from the first breath. Medieval Europe, being born a peasant means inheriting a life already decided. You do not choose your land, your labor, or your lord. You inherit obligation as surely as you inherit hunger. The village you are born into likely contains only a few dozen families, each tied to the same fields, the same routines, and the same unchanging expectations. Most peasants will never travel more than a few miles from this place. The horizon you see as a child may be the same one you see on the day you die. Infant mortality is relentless. In some regions, as many as 1 in 3 children die before reaching the age of 5. Illness, contaminated water, malnutrition, and sheer bad luck claim lives without pattern or warning. Your parents do not name you immediately, not because they do not care, but because experience has taught them restraint. Attachment is dangerous when survival is uncertain. If you live, you grow quickly, not because life is comfortable, but because it demands usefulness early. Childhood, as a protected phase of life, does not exist for you. By the age of 5 or 6, you are already expected to help. You gather firewood. You scare birds from fields. You watch younger siblings while adults labor from sunrise to sunset. No one teaches you these duties formally. You learn by observing, by being corrected sharply, and by necessity. The land defines everything. The village exists because the soil allows it, and you exist to serve that soil. Fields are divided into strips, scattered across open farmland. These strips are not owned outright by your family. They are held in exchange for labor owed to a lord, labor that must be given whether your own crops thrive or fail. The concept of private property as you understand it today does not apply here. You belong to the land almost as much as the land belongs to the Lord. Your home is small and dark. Smoke from the hearth fills the air, escaping slowly through a hole in the roof or the gaps between wooden beams. Animals often share the space. Chickens, maybe a pig, because warmth matters more than separation. The floor is packed earth, damp in winter, dusty in summer. Furniture is minimal. A table, a few stools, straw bedding that must be replaced often. Privacy is non-existent. Food shapes your days and your thoughts. Hunger is not a crisis. It is a constant background presence. Most meals are built around bread made from coarse grains and a thin pottage of vegetables or legumes. Meat is rare, usually reserved for feast days or when an animal can no longer work. Ale is safer than water and consumed daily, even by children, though it is weak by modern standards. You eat what the land gives, and some years the land gives very little. Your body adapts to labor early. By adolescence, you are already hardened by repetitive work, plowing, sowing, harvesting, carrying loads that strain growing bones. Injuries are common and often untreated. A twisted ankle or infected cut can mean months of pain, permanent disability, or death. There is no safety net beyond family and neighbors who are themselves barely surviving. Religion surrounds you, but understanding it is limited. Services are conducted in Latin, a language you do not speak. Faith is experienced through ritual, imagery, and fear rather than theology. You are taught that your suffering has meaning, that endurance will be rewarded in the next life. This belief is not abstract comfort, it is a practical necessity. Without it, despair would be unbearable. Seasons rule your existence more strictly than any king. Spring brings planting and exhaustion. Summer brings endless daylight and relentless work. Autumn is harvest, the most critical and dangerous time of year when failure means starvation. Winter brings cold, darkness, and waiting. Each year follows the same cycle, with only small variations. Change, when it comes, is usually destructive rather than progressive. You grow up knowing authority without ever seeing its full face. The Lord who owns the land may live miles away, but his presence is constant through stewards, courts, and demands. You owe labor days, taxes in kind, and obedience. Disobedience is punished publicly. The village watches as lessons are enforced, because fear maintains order more effectively than force alone. Education is not meant for you. Literacy is rare among peasants and unnecessary in the eyes of those who rule. Knowledge is practical: how to judge soil, when to plant, how to store grain, how to survive winter. Stories are told orally, repeated across generations, shaping memory instead of history. As you reach adulthood, you realize something slowly and without drama. Your life will likely mirror your parents' lives almost exactly. You will work the same land, eat the same food, endure the same hardships, and die without leaving a written trace. This realization does not come with rebellion or anger. It arrives quietly, as acceptance shaped by exhaustion. And yet, even within this narrow world, you form attachments. You laugh during rare festivals. You share stories by firelight. You mark time not by years but by harvests survived. Life is harsh, but it is also familiar. The routines that confine you also protect you from uncertainty. As you stand at the edge of adulthood, already tired, already shaped by labor, one question lingers beneath the routine. If this life is inherited and unchanging, what happens when the system that binds you to the land begins to crack? By the time you are fully grown, your place in the village is fixed, not formally announced, not written down, but understood by everyone around you. You are a laborer because you were born to be one. The land has already claimed your body, and now it claims your time. Your days begin before sunrise. There is no alarm, only habit and necessity. Light is precious, especially during planting and harvest seasons, and no one wastes it. You wake on straw bedding that smells faintly of smoke and damp earth. The air inside the hut is cold in winter, stale in summer. You eat quickly bread if there is any, thin ale if it remains, because there is work waiting, and delay brings punishment. Much of your labor is not for yourself. This is the defining reality of peasant life. Several days each week are owed directly to the lord of the manor. These are known as labor services, and they take priority over your own fields. When the lord's land demands plowing, harvesting, or repair, you go, even if your own crops are failing. Refusal is not an option. Obligation is enforced by fines, confiscation, or physical punishment. The injustice of this system is obvious, but it is also normalized. You have never known another way of living. Your parents lived this way, their parents before them. The idea that land could belong fully to the person who works it is not part of your mental world. Instead, survival depends on balancing compliance with quiet endurance. The village itself operates as a tightly controlled unit. Everyone knows everyone else's business, not out of curiosity but necessity. If someone fails to show up for work, others must compensate. If one family hoards grain, another starves. Cooperation is not virtuous. It is required. Conflicts happen, but open rebellion within the village is rare. The risks are too high and the consequences too severe. Justice is local and immediate. Minor disputes over boundaries, animals, or borrowed tools are settled in manorial courts. These courts are not neutral. They exist to maintain order and protect the Lord's interests. You are judged by people who benefit from your obedience. Punishments are public and humiliating. Shame is a tool as powerful as fear. Your body bears the cost of this system. Years of repetitive labor leave marks: calloused hands, bent backs, chronic pain that never fully fades. There is no concept of retirement. You work until you physically cannot, and then you rely on family if they can afford to help you. Many cannot. Old age is not gentle. It is another form of vulnerability. Illness is constant and poorly understood. A fever may pass or it may kill you. An infection may heal or it may rot the flesh until amputation or death is the only outcome. Treatments are based on tradition and superstition, herbs, prayers, bloodletting. Sometimes they help, often they do nothing. There is no expectation of cure, only hope of survival. Women's labor is relentless and often invisible. In addition to field work, women manage food preparation, child care, spinning, brewing, and household maintenance. Pregnancy does not excuse anyone from work for long. Childbirth is dangerous, repeated often, and mourned quietly when it ends in death. Loss is common enough that grief becomes muted, not because love is absent, but because endurance demands restraint. Marriage is practical rather than romantic. It is arranged within the village or neighboring settlements, guided by land, labor needs, and survival rather than affection. Emotional bonds may grow, but they are secondary to function. A household must work, or it fails. Children are both responsibility and necessity, extra mouths to feed, but also future laborers. Despite the hardship, moments of relief exist. Religious festivals interrupt the routine with color, sound, and food. Music appears, simple instruments, familiar songs. Ale flows more freely. For a brief time, hierarchy softens. Laughter becomes possible. These moments matter more than they seem. They break the monotony just enough to make the rest bearable. Rumors travel slowly but persistently. Stories of distant wars, failed harvests, or unrest in other regions reach the village through travelers, priests, or displaced peasants. Most of these events feel abstract, far away, yet they plant quiet seeds of awareness. The world is larger than your fields, even if you will never see it. Occasionally, the balance breaks. A harvest fails completely. Weather turns against you. Taxes increase without explanation. In these moments, the system reveals its fragility. Hunger sharpens memory. People remember injustices more clearly when they are starving. Small acts of resistance appear. Grain hidden, labor slowed, rules bent quietly rather than openly challenged. You learn the limits of obedience. You learn how much you can endure before survival demands defiance. This knowledge is never spoken aloud, but it is shared through behavior. A glance, a delay, a refusal disguised as exhaustion. These are the tools available to people with no formal power. As years pass, you begin to notice subtle changes. Population shifts. Land is abandoned in some places and crowded in others. Lords demand more, not less, to maintain their status. Pressure builds quietly, unevenly. Life remains routine, but tension hums beneath it, barely acknowledged. You are still a peasant, still bound to the soil, still living a life shaped by obligation rather than choice. But the certainty that this system will last forever begins to feel less solid than it once did. Something is changing, slowly and unevenly, beyond the edges of your fields. And as you bend once more to the labor of another season, a question lingers beneath the weight of routine. What happens when endurance reaches its limit, not just for you, but for everyone bound to this land? By the time you reach middle age, if you reach it at all, your body tells the story of your life more clearly than any words ever could. Your hands are thickened and scarred, fingers permanently bent from gripping tools year after year. Your back aches even when you are still, a deep, familiar pain that no longer surprises you. Pain has become part of the background of existence, like hunger once was in childhood. There is no clear moment when you are considered old. You simply become slower. You take longer to rise in the morning. You rest more often at the edge of the field. Younger villagers begin to take on the heaviest tasks, not out of kindness but efficiency. The land demands strength, and strength fades. Your usefulness, once unquestioned, now feels fragile. In a society without savings, pensions, or institutions of care, survival in later life depends almost entirely on family. If you have children who survived infancy and stayed nearby, you may be supported in small ways: lighter work, shared food, a place near the fire. If you do not, old age becomes a slow narrowing of options. Illness visits more frequently now, a cough that lingers, a fever that drains what little energy remains. You know people who went to bed with such symptoms and never rose again. Death is not dramatic in your world. It is expected, familiar, and often quiet. There are no last words carefully recorded, no legacies written down. Most lives end as they were lived without witnesses beyond family and neighbors. Burial is simple, a grave in consecrated ground if the village is fortunate enough to have it. A prayer spoken in a language you never fully understood. The community pauses briefly, then returns to work. Fields still need tending. Survival does not wait. And yet before that final moment arrives, something extraordinary happens, not always, not everywhere, but often enough to matter. The world you were born into begins to shift. Sometimes the change comes suddenly. Disease sweeps through the countryside, emptying villages in weeks. Fields go untilled. Lords lose tenants faster than they can replace them. Labor becomes scarce, and scarcity changes value. For the first time, the work you have always been forced to give gains leverage. In some regions, peasants demand better terms. In others, they simply leave, seeking abandoned land elsewhere. Sometimes the change is slower. Markets expand. Coin becomes more common. Obligations once paid in labor shift gradually toward rent. The Lord's grip weakens not because he chooses it, but because the old system no longer functions as it once did. The land remains, but the relationships around it begin to loosen. You may not fully understand these changes. You may not benefit from them directly. Many peasants live and die before the transformation reaches their village. But the certainty that once defined your life, that nothing could ever be different, no longer feels absolute. There are moments late in life when you remember childhood, the same fields, the same paths, the same routines repeated so often they feel eternal. And yet something has changed. Fewer people work beside you. Boundaries have shifted. Old customs are questioned quietly, cautiously. You do not think of yourself as part of history. You think of yourself as someone who worked, endured, and survived as long as possible. But endurance itself is historical. The systems that shaped medieval Europe were built not only by kings and wars, but by countless ordinary lives lived under constraint. Your life, unrecorded and unnamed, helped feed cities, support armies, and sustain institutions that would one day outgrow the world you knew. The food you grew, the labor you gave, the children you raised, all of it formed the foundation for transformations you would never see. When your life ends, the village continues. Another child is born on a dirt floor. Another set of hands begins learning the weight of tools. The cycle repeats, but not endlessly. Centuries later, the world will look back and struggle to imagine how such a life could be endured at all. And yet it was endured by millions, across generations, without recognition or reward. The brutal lives of medieval peasants rarely appear in grand narratives of history, but without them, there would be no castles to admire, no kingdoms to study, no progress to trace. Their story is not one of dramatic rebellion or sudden change, but of persistence so steady it reshaped the world without announcing itself. As you reflect on this life, ordinary, exhausting, and quietly essential, you may wonder how much of the modern world still rests on unseen labor, and which parts of our own daily routines might one day seem just as unimaginable. Story 2: Hunger Years. What it meant to live one bad harvest away from death. You learn early that hunger is not an accident. It is a season that arrives without invitation and leaves when it chooses. In the medieval countryside, survival depends less on strength than on timing, on whether the rain comes when it should, whether the frost waits, whether the grain ripens before rot sets in. Most years are merely hard. Some years are catastrophic. This is one of those years. Spring begins with promise, as it often does. The fields are plowed, the seed scattered with practiced motions passed down through generations. You do not question whether the harvest will come. To do so would be paralyzing. Faith in routine is necessary, even when experience warns otherwise. But soon, the rain refuses to stop. It rains for days, then weeks. Paths dissolve into mud. Oxen strain uselessly against waterlogged soil. Seed rots before it can take root. You watch the fields daily, searching for signs of recovery, but the land gives nothing back. There is no alternative plan. You cannot simply plant elsewhere. This land is all you have. By early summer, the truth settles quietly across the village. There will be no proper harvest this year. Hunger does not strike immediately. It announces itself slowly, through smaller portions, through substitutions. Grain stores are opened cautiously. Bread grows darker and denser as fillers are added: peas, acorns, whatever can be ground down and stretched. Meals are skipped without comment. Children learn to eat less by watching adults pretend they are not hungry. The Lord's demands do not disappear. Taxes are still due. Rent is still expected. The fields may have failed, but obligation has not. Grain that could have fed families is sent away to fulfill dues. You watch carts leave the village, knowing what they carry, knowing what it means. As summer fades, desperation sharpens behavior. Animals that should have been kept for breeding are slaughtered early. Tools are sold or pawned. Clothing is patched until fabric gives way entirely. These choices solve immediate problems while deepening long-term ruin. Survival now means borrowing against the future. Illness follows hunger as predictably as winter follows autumn. Weakened bodies cannot resist infection. Children grow quiet and thin. Elders fade quickly. Fevers spread through cramped homes where warmth and proximity make separation impossible. There is no understanding of germs, only the observation that hunger and death seem to walk together. Rumors spread faster than food ever could. Other villages are suffering too. Some are worse off. Some have already begun to empty. Families leave under cover of night, heading toward towns or monasteries rumored to offer charity. Many never arrive. Roads are dangerous and desperation breeds violence. You stay because leaving is a gamble you cannot afford. The land, failed as it is, still offers familiarity. You know where to forage. You know who might share. You know where the risks lie. Hunger teaches calculation. Autumn arrives without celebration. Harvest festivals are canceled quietly without announcement. There is nothing to celebrate. The fields yield little more than straw. What grain exists is divided carefully, arguments breaking out over measures and fairness. Trust erodes under pressure. Cooperation becomes conditional. Winter is brutal. Cold increases the body's demand for food just as supplies reach their lowest point. Fires are kept small to conserve fuel. Nights are long, filled with the sound of stomachs and coughing. Sleep comes unevenly, interrupted by hunger and anxiety. People begin to die. Deaths are not sudden or dramatic. They happen after weeks of decline. A child stops eating. An elder does not wake up. A neighbor disappears quietly, their hut abandoned. Burials become more frequent, prayers shorter. There is no time for prolonged mourning. Social order strains but does not immediately collapse. Most people continue to follow rules, not because they believe in them, but because chaos offers no guarantee of survival. Theft increases, but cautiously. Violence remains rare, not out of morality, but calculation. Injury is too risky when healing is uncertain. The church offers explanations but little relief. Hunger is framed as a test, a punishment, or a mystery of divine will. These explanations provide structure when material answers are absent. Faith does not fill stomachs, but it gives suffering a narrative, and narratives matter when endurance is all that remains. By late winter, the village you knew no longer exists in the same way. Families have merged to conserve resources. Social boundaries have blurred. Pride has been swallowed by necessity. People who once would never have asked for help now do so without hesitation. When spring finally returns, it does not bring immediate relief. Seed grain is scarce. Many fields remain untilled because there are fewer hands to work them. Recovery is slow, uneven, and uncertain. Some losses cannot be undone. And yet people plant again. They always do. The decision to plant after catastrophe is not optimism. It is habit reinforced by survival. The future is unknowable, but the present demands action. Hunger teaches patience as much as it teaches fear. As you press seed into the soil once more, thinner than you were a year ago, weaker but still standing, a quiet question hangs in the air. How many times can a community survive a year like this before something fundamental breaks? When spring returns after a hunger year, it does not arrive as renewal. It comes as obligation. You plant because you must, not because you believe. The fields look the same, but the people working them do not. There are fewer bodies now, fewer voices. Spaces open in the line of laborers where neighbors once stood. No one comments on this directly. Absence has become ordinary. Seed grain is the first problem. Much of what should have been saved for planting was eaten to survive the winter. What remains is carefully measured, often inadequate. Fields that once produced barley or wheat are left fallow or planted with hardier crops, rye, oats, anything that might grow in poor soil under uncertain skies. Yield matters less than reliability now. The work feels heavier than it should. Hunger lingers even after food returns in small amounts. Bodies weakened by months of deprivation recover slowly. Simple infections flare up again. A cut that once would have healed now festers. People rest when they can, but rest competes with survival. Social rules shift subtly during these months. Old expectations soften. Lords delay rents in some regions, not out of mercy, but calculation. Dead tenants produce nothing. Empty land pays no dues. In other places, demands increase instead, squeezing the remaining population harder to compensate for losses. There is no single experience of famine recovery, only uneven outcomes shaped by power and geography. Charity exists, but it is limited and conditional. Monasteries distribute food when they can, but their stores are not endless. Aid often comes with prayers, obligations, or public displays of gratitude. Help is never anonymous. Survival becomes something you must visibly earn. The hunger year changes how people think. Waste becomes unthinkable. Everything is reused, repurposed, consumed down to the last possible value. Bones are boiled repeatedly. Scraps are saved. Nothing edible is discarded. This mindset persists long after the immediate crisis fades, shaping habits for a lifetime. Children born during or shortly after a famine are smaller, weaker. Many will not survive childhood. Those who do carry the effects quietly stunted growth, fragile health, a constant vulnerability to the next hardship. Hunger leaves marks that cannot be seen easily, but they are there. Stories circulate about places that fared better, regions where weather spared the crops, towns where trade softened the blow. These stories matter, not because they offer immediate solutions, but because they redraw mental maps. People begin to understand that suffering is not always universal, that conditions can differ beyond the village boundary. This realization fuels movement. When the next shortage threatens, more people choose to leave early rather than wait. Migration becomes a survival strategy rather than an act of desperation. Lords respond by tightening restrictions, attempting to bind labor more firmly to land that now struggles to hold anyone at all. Tension grows quietly. Hunger has taught people where the limits are how much they can endure before rules become negotiable. Compliance becomes more conditional. Resistance remains subtle, but it spreads. Delayed labor, hidden grain, quiet refusal framed as inability. The hunger year is never forgotten. It becomes a reference point. Time is measured against it, before the hunger, after the hunger. Decisions are shaped by memory. Risk is calculated differently. People prepare more carefully when they can. But preparation itself is limited by poverty. You cannot save what you do not have. As seasons pass and stability slowly returns, life resumes its familiar rhythm. But it is not the same rhythm as before. Something fragile has been exposed. The land is no longer assumed to be reliable. Authority is no longer assumed to be protective. survival feels more personal, more uncertain. You work, you eat, you endure, but you remember. And as another year unfolds, with weather once again unpredictable, a question settles into the shared consciousness of the village. If hunger is not an exception but a recurring threat, how long can this way of life continue without breaking entirely? When enough hunger years accumulate, they stop being remembered as individual disasters. They merge into something broader, a condition of life rather than an interruption to it. You no longer speak of the famine. You speak of times like those, as if scarcity were a season that might return at any moment. By the time stability resumes, if it resumes at all, the village has been reshaped in ways that are not immediately visible. Fields have changed hands. Some lie abandoned, others consolidated. Families once numerous are now reduced to a single survivor. The social map has been redrawn quietly, without decree or announcement. You notice the change first in labor. Where hands were once plentiful, they are now valuable. A generation earlier, refusing a lord's demand would have been unthinkable. Now, refusal happens indirectly through absence, illness, or departure. Lords respond unevenly. Some adapt, offering better terms to retain workers. Others double down, enforcing harsher controls that only accelerate flight. This shift does not feel like progress while you are living through it. It feels unstable, dangerous. Old rules no longer function, but new ones have not yet formed. Hunger has weakened authority not through rebellion, but through attrition. Power depends on people, and hunger has taken too many away. Markets grow slowly in response. Trade becomes more important where local production has proven unreliable. Coin circulates more widely. Rent replaces labor service in some areas, not because it is fairer, but because it is easier to enforce when bodies are scarce. These changes are practical responses to repeated crisis, not ideological transformations. You may never use the word economy, but you live inside its shifting logic. Religion, too, adjusts quietly. Hunger years strain faith without erasing it. Some turn more devout, seeking meaning in suffering. Others grow distant, frustrated by explanations that do not feed children. New devotions appear, saints associated with protection, harvest, or disease. Faith becomes more personal, more desperate, less orderly. The memory of hunger sharpens community bonds in some places and fractures them in others. Villages that shared survive differently than those that competed internally. Trust becomes a resource as important as grain. Once lost, it is difficult to restore. Children who grow up after a hunger year are taught differently. They learn caution early. Waste is treated almost as a sin. Food is respected in a way that borders on reverence. Stories of the famine are repeated, not to frighten, but to instruct. Memory becomes a survival tool passed between generations. For those who lived through the worst, the body never fully forgets. Hunger leaves lasting marks: frailty, chronic illness, shortened lifespans. These are not recorded in any ledger, but they shape demographics quietly. Entire generations grow smaller, weaker, fewer. Over time, repeated hunger years accumulate enough pressure to force systemic change. The old balance between land, labor, and authority can no longer hold. This does not happen everywhere at once, and it does not happen cleanly. It unfolds unevenly, through adaptation rather than collapse. You may die before seeing any of this clearly. Most peasants do, but your endurance matters all the same. Every hunger year survived alters expectations. Every recovery teaches limits. The world you leave behind is not the same one you inherited. Centuries later, historians will describe these periods with numbers: crop yields, mortality rates, prices. But those figures cannot capture the daily calculations you made. How much to eat today to survive tomorrow, whether to stay or leave, whether to obey or risk punishment. Hunger was not just a physical condition. It was a force that reshaped behavior, relationships, and systems. It taught restraint, fear, resilience, and Eventually, the possibility that the way things had always been might not be the way they would remain. When modern societies speak of food security, supply chains, and safety nets, they are responding often unknowingly to lessons learned in these centuries of uncertainty. The fear of scarcity is ancient. The memory of hunger lingers long after fields recover. And as you consider how close medieval life always was to collapse, how one season could determine survival, you may recognize echoes in the present. The quiet dependence on systems we barely notice until they fail, and the resilience required when they do. Story 3. The Lord's Land, Feudal Obligations and Endless Labor. You live on land you do not own, work fields you cannot leave, and owe labor that is never fully repaid. This is the quiet foundation of the feudal world, not banners or castles, but obligation layered so deeply into daily life that it feels as natural as the changing seasons. From the moment you are old enough to work, you understand a simple truth. The land is not yours. It belongs to a lord whose authority is rarely questioned, even when his presence is distant. Whether you live in rural England, northern France, or across the scattered territories of the Holy Roman Empire, the structure is familiar. You are tied to an estate, and the estate defines your life. The lord may reside in a manor house or castle several miles away. You may only see him once or twice a year, if at all. But his authority is present every day through stewards, reeves, bailiffs, and the rules they enforce. You owe him labor, produce, and loyalty, not because of a written contract you signed, but because you were born where you were born. Your week is divided before it begins. Certain days belong entirely to the Lord. On those days, you work his fields instead of your own. You plow, sow, harvest, repair fences, clear ditches, haul timber, whatever is required to keep the estate functioning. These labor days are not negotiable. If the Lord's crops need attention at the same time as yours, his come first. This creates a constant tension that shapes your decisions. You must plan your own survival around obligations that do not prioritize it. A delayed planting in your strip of land can mean a smaller harvest. A smaller harvest can mean hunger. And yet, refusal to serve brings punishment more immediate than hunger ever could be. Punishment is rarely subtle. Fines strip away what little surplus you might have. Confiscation removes tools or animals essential to survival. Physical punishment, while less common, is always possible. More often, shame is used. You are reprimanded publicly, made an example of, reminded that obedience is communal, not personal. The manorial court is where this authority becomes visible. These courts handle everything from missed labor to disputes over land boundaries and inheritance. They are overseen by representatives of the Lord, not neutral judges. You participate because you must. Justice here is not about fairness as you understand it. It is about order. Even the land you farm for yourself is constrained. Your strips are scattered across the open fields, intermingled with those of other villagers. This arrangement enforces cooperation. You cannot decide independently when to plant or harvest. The village moves together, bound by shared schedules and shared risk. Individual choice is limited by design. Taxes take many forms. Some are paid in produce, grain, eggs, livestock. Others are paid in labor. Still others are paid simply for the right to exist as you do. Fees to marry, to inherit land, to use the mill or bake bread in the Lord's oven. Each obligation may seem small, but together they form a web that is difficult to escape. You are not entirely without rights, but they are narrow and fragile. Custom protects you more than law. What your parents did, you are often allowed to do, but only as long as it does not conflict with the Lord's interests. Change is viewed with suspicion, not because it is dangerous, but because it threatens predictability. Time itself feels owned. Bells signal when to work, when to stop, when to attend religious services that reinforce obedience. The rhythm of your day is synchronized with the estate's needs. Even rest feels conditional, something allowed rather than assumed. And yet within this rigid system, small spaces of autonomy exist. You manage your household. You decide how to stretch food, how to care for animals, how to divide labor among family members. These decisions matter deeply, even if they do not alter the larger structure. Survival is built from small choices repeated daily. Resentment exists, but it is rarely explosive. Anger burns slowly, tempered by fear and habit. Most peasants do not dream of overthrowing the system. They dream of lighter obligations, fairer treatment, one less labor day owed. The horizon of possibility is shaped by experience, not imagination. You hear stories sometimes of places where obligations are different, towns where labor is paid in coin, villages where rents have replaced service. These stories feel distant, almost unreal. Still, they linger. They suggest that the system you live under is not the only one possible. For now, though, the Lord's land remains your world. Every furrow you dig, every crop you gather, every day you labor ties you more tightly to it. You do not mark time by years, but by obligations fulfilled and endured. As another season begins and the demands of the estate press down once more, a quiet question takes shape beneath the routine. If obligation defines your life so completely, what happens when the balance between what you owe and what you can endure finally tips too far? The rhythm of your life is dictated less by desire than by duty. From the moment the sun rises, your body is in motion, moving with a precision imposed by custom, necessity, and fear. The fields are never empty. They demand constant attention. The Lord's land, in particular, is unforgiving. Every furrow, every row, every harvest counts not for you, but for Him, and the cost of failure is immediate. Labor service is your life's measure. Days spent working the Lord's land are not easily recouped on your own strips. You calculate constantly. If you spend 6 days plowing His wheat, that leaves only 1 day for your own barley. You cannot neglect either. Failure in your own work threatens hunger. Failure in His work threatens punishment. Time is a currency you never own. You spend it carefully, constantly aware of the fine line between survival and disaster. You learn the tricks that help you stretch time and energy. You share labor with neighbors, quietly coordinating who will take breaks or watch fields while others work. You stagger chores, move swiftly between obligations, conserve energy where possible. Even small innovations like planting seeds closer together, drying grain efficiently, or mending tools quickly carry real value. They are not celebrated, but they determine whether your family survives. Seasons dictate your movements even more than obligations. Spring requires plowing, sowing, repairing fences. Summer is for weeding and tending. Autumn brings harvest, the moment when months of effort must be transformed into sustenance. Winter, supposedly a time of rest, is instead occupied with maintenance, tool repair, and preparation for the next cycle. You never stop. The calendar is relentless. Weather adds uncertainty to this already rigid structure. A sudden frost, heavy rain, or drought can undo weeks of labor in a day. You cannot predict it, cannot control it. The Lord does not care if His crops fail. His authority and rights remain the same. You are punished for delays caused by forces beyond your control. Nature is another master, alongside your human overlord. Your body, conditioned by decades of repetitive work, carries the scars. Hands are calloused, backs bent, joints stiff. Injuries are tolerated but never fully healed. A broken limb or deep cut may linger as a reminder that survival is always precarious. There is no room for weakness, and yet everyone experiences it. The communal understanding of vulnerability allows quiet adaptation. Neighbors help when necessary, but they also expect reciprocation. The Lord's representatives enforce discipline in subtle ways. A missing day of work, an incomplete hedge, a forgotten animal in the pen, all are noted. Punishments are often public. Fines extracted, work reassigned, shamming verbalized in the village square. These measures do more than enforce labor, they reinforce social hierarchy and the constant reminder that authority exists, even when unseen. Evenings when labor ends offer little respite. The household demands attention. food preparation, childcare, spinning, mending. The responsibilities of survival never pause. If you have children, their presence is another layer of labor, not a relief. Their education is practical, learning to work fields, care for animals, and follow rules that protect them from immediate harm. Women's labor is particularly invisible but indispensable. Beyond the fields, they manage domestic production, maintain hygiene, and preserve food for winter. Pregnancies and childbirth occur amidst this work, often without rest. Survival is collective. Every member of the household contributes, and each contribution is critical. The Lord's demands extend beyond the fields. You may be called to repair roads, collect taxes, or assist in other tasks that benefit the estate. These obligations can conflict with your own survival needs. The balance is fragile, and miscalculation can have serious consequences. A late harvest, a neglected fence, a sick child each is a small crisis with potential repercussions. Despite the oppressive structure, the human capacity to adapt is remarkable. Villagers develop networks of support. Neighbors exchange labor, food, or advice quietly, always within the constraints imposed by the Lord. Festivals, though rare, provide moments of respite. Religious observances offer moral and emotional frameworks to make sense of hardship. These small spaces of autonomy and relief do not challenge the system, they coexist within it. Over time, you recognize that endurance is both a survival strategy and a subtle form of power. The Lord can demand labor, but he cannot make people stronger than they are. The village survives because of careful negotiation, unspoken limits, and the quiet resilience of people who have no other option. This resilience is invisible in records, yet it sustains the estate itself. And as you observe your own life in repetition, the furrows dug, the grain harvested, the winters endured, an unsettling thought begins to form. If the labor that sustains kingdoms is performed by those whose needs are barely met, what happens when endurance reaches its limit? What happens when enough bodies are too tired, too weak, too hungry, or simply gone? Eventually, endurance reaches its limit, not dramatically, but quietly, in the slow erosion of compliance. You have worked the Lord's fields for decades, born children who have worked the same, witnessed neighbors disappear under the weight of labor, illness, or hunger. The pattern repeats, but cracks begin to appear. These are not always obvious, and they do not announce themselves, but they shape the course of life and eventually history. One year, a crop fails on a scale that overwhelms even your accustomed caution. Labor that once seemed sufficient no longer maintains the Lord's lands or your own. Hunger spreads, illness follows, and the village collectively grows weaker. The Lord's authority, usually unquestioned, is suddenly constrained. Desperate people are harder to command, and commands are sometimes ignored. Subtly, work slows. Tasks are left unfinished. Small acts of defiance become common. Migration emerges as a quiet form of resistance. Young people leave, seeking abandoned or underutilized land elsewhere. Entire families sometimes relocate in search of survival. The manor, once assured of its labor, now faces scarcity. Lords respond unevenly. Some demand more forcibly, others negotiate, offering less labor-intensive obligations. The social contract that once seemed immutable now bends under pressure. Even without outright rebellion, the balance shifts. Peasants who survive successive crises develop a stronger sense of their own value. Labor is scarce, and scarcity creates leverage. Negotiation may be subtle, delaying work, hiding produce, claiming illness, but it is increasingly possible. Authority is still present, but it is no longer absolute. Your body, like the system itself, bears the cumulative weight of years. Arthritis, chronic fatigue, and lingering injuries make tasks that were once routine nearly impossible. The young may mock or pity, but survival depends on continued participation. In this way, the human cost of feudal labor is visible across generations. Your children inherit both the obligations and the fatigue of their parents. The Lord's system, for all its rigidity, is designed to endure through repetition, but repetition depends on the people who perform it. When labor is disrupted, the structure itself begins to strain. Roads become poorly maintained. Fences fail. Crops are left unharvested. Even small disruptions have cascading effects because every part of the manor relies on coordinated labor. Religion attempts to frame these hardships. Preachers explain failures of crops or the spread of disease as tests of faith or punishment for sins. This offers narrative structure, if not relief. Festivals and church obligations continue, often with reduced vigor, but they reinforce the underlying hierarchy. Survival is interpreted through faith as much as through effort. Despite the pressure, moments of ordinary life persist. Families eat together when food allows, share small joys, tell stories by firelight. Children play in fields when work is momentarily complete. These moments are fragile but vital, sustaining morale even when survival is precarious. By late middle age, you see how your own endurance shapes the lives of others. Your ability to continue working affects not only your household, but also neighbors, friends, and distant relatives who rely on shared labor and mutual support. The collective effort of survival forms a quiet, invisible backbone to the feudal system. Without it, the estate itself would collapse. Yet even as you work and awareness grows, the system you serve is not infallible. Crises reveal limits. Hunger exposes vulnerabilities. Scarcity transforms obedience into negotiation. And as more peasants discover the boundaries of endurance, the relationship between labor, survival, and authority slowly shifts. By the end of life, you recognize that your story, repetitive, constrained, exhausting, was not meaningless. Every furrow dug, every crop harvested, every winter endured contributed to the functioning of a broader society. You were part of a vast, largely invisible workforce that sustained kingdoms, armies, and markets long before modern economic structures existed. And yet your experience also contains a caution. Systems built on human labor have limits. They can only extract so much, and when the limits are reached, the consequences ripple outward, affecting society in ways visible only in hindsight. Peasant endurance, quiet and unnoticed, forms the bedrock of history, but it also contains the seeds of change. As you look back on decades of toil, you realize that every season survived, every labor day completed, and every minor act of resistance subtly reshaped the balance between those who rule and those who sustain. The medieval system may have seemed eternal, but it was, in truth, fragile, and the fragility was written in the sweat, blood, and resilience of the peasants themselves. Story 4. Homes of mud and smoke, daily life inside a peasant hut. You enter your home after a long day of labor, but it is not a sanctuary. It is a small, crowded space defined by necessity, not comfort. The walls are wattle and daub, a lattice of wood smeared with mud, straw, or clay. Sometimes stone or brick is used, but mostly the construction is humble, built by hands that have also labored the fields. The roof is thatched, thick with reeds or straw, often leaking during rainstorms. Gaps between beams let in wind, snow, and insects alike. Privacy is non-existent. Even at night, the sounds of work, animals, and family carry through every corner. The floor is packed earth, sometimes reinforced with straw to absorb moisture. You sleep on rushes or straw piled in a corner, covered by coarse blankets if the family can afford them. During winter, the floor is cold and damp. During summer, dust rises with each movement. Floors are swept only occasionally, as labor is prioritized elsewhere and cleanliness is relative. The home smells of smoke, animals, food, and human bodies, a constant reminder that life is carried out collectively, in close quarters. The hearth dominates the interior. It is the heart of the hut both physically and symbolically. Fire provides warmth, cooks food, and is a focal point for gatherings. Smoke often lingers because chimneys are rudimentary or absent. Your eyes water, your hair smells of soot, but it is the price of survival. The hearth also reinforces hierarchy within the household. The family gathers around it according to age, gender, and status, with elders or heads of household taking prominence. Animals are part of daily life, not separated from it. Chickens roost in corners, pigs or goats may be tethered inside during winter, dogs share the floor. The presence of animals is practical. They provide food, labor, and security, but it also adds to the crowded, odorous environment. The constant interaction with animals teaches children early how to care for creatures that are essential to survival. Furniture is sparse. A table, perhaps a stool or bench, a few storage chests, and the bedding are all the household can afford. Work and rest occupy the same space. Tools are kept inside for safety or ease of use, so your domestic area is also your workplace. Even sleeping quarters are functional. Straw must be replaced, blankets mended, animals occasionally driven out for hygiene. Life is continuous labor. Lighting is minimal. During the day, windows, if they exist, provide little illumination. Evening brings darkness, broken only by the flickering glow of the hearth or oil lamps, which are expensive and smoky. Tasks after sunset are limited. Sewing, mending, or spinning are common, quiet activities that must be done even after physical exhaustion from the fields. Darkness imposes both caution and rhythm, shaping the work you can accomplish and the rest you can take. Food preparation dominates much of the indoor space. Simple meals are cooked over open flames. Bread is baked in communal ovens when available, pottage simmered over the hearth, ale brewed as both nourishment and hydration. Meals are repetitive, modest, and dictated by what the land produces. Storage is primitive. Grains in sacks, vegetables in pits, preserved meat or cheese hung or buried. Spoilage is constant danger, and scarcity requires constant attention. Every scrap is used. Waste is a luxury no one can afford. Children grow up intimately familiar with the domestic space. Their education is practical. They learn to cook, clean, care for animals, spin wool, and repair tools. Play exists, but it is intertwined with work. Games are improvised with sticks or scraps. Imagination must coexist with the pressing demands of survival. Sanitation is minimal. Waste is removed to the edges of the yard, sometimes composted, sometimes left to contaminate the ground. Illness spreads quickly in such conditions, making disease a constant companion. You learn early to recognize its signs, to isolate the sick when possible, and to treat them with herbs, prayers, or traditional remedies. Death is never far away, and funerals are pragmatic affairs, conducted in haste to protect the living. The hut is also a place of social negotiation. Family hierarchies are maintained, but community matters intrude constantly. Visitors may arrive unexpectedly, neighbors seeking help, traders offering goods, officials enforcing obligations. Space must accommodate these intrusions, often at the expense of comfort or privacy. You learn to adapt, to manage tension, and to accept the continuous presence of others as normal. Despite the hardships, domestic life contains its own rhythm and culture. Festivals, religious observances, and seasonal tasks provide structure. Storytelling, songs, and prayers offer moments of connection and meaning. Even within the constraints of mud and smoke, life persists, and resilience develops quietly through routine, adaptation, and shared labor. And yet, amid these walls, one thought never fully disappears. If survival requires constant adjustment, endurance, and negotiation in even the most private space, how much strain can the household bear before the pressures of environment, labor, and authority overwhelm it completely? Your home is never just a home. It is an extension of the fields, a place where labor continues even after the sun sets. The line between work and rest is blurred. Life is organized around tasks that are essential for survival. Every corner serves a purpose. Every object is functional. Comfort is secondary, if it exists at all. The hearth, still the central feature, demands constant attention. Fire must be maintained day and night during winter. Smoke may choke the household, but it is better than freezing. The fire cooks meals, melts snow for water, and provides warmth for both people and animals. Smoke seeps into walls and ceilings, darkening everything, leaving a permanent residue, but this is an acceptable cost. Survival is not clean. it is effective. Food preparation dominates daily routines. You grind grains, stir pottage, and bake bread when ovens are accessible. Preservation is critical. Vegetables are salted or dried. Meat is smoked or boiled repeatedly. Every meal is a careful calculation. How much can we eat today without jeopardizing tomorrow? Children learn early to help, measuring flour, fetching water, or tending the hearth under close supervision. Mistakes can mean wasted resources and hunger. Domestic chores are unending. Clothes are repaired, spun, and washed by hand. Tools are mended, fences patched, floors swept or at least scraped because dirt left unchecked invites disease. Even chores considered mundane carry weight. Cleaning is not about aesthetics but about preventing illness, pests, or structural decay. The household is a delicate balance, a system maintained through constant vigilance. Animals remain inside much of the year. Chickens scratch in corners, pigs are tethered indoors, goats may share the living space. Their presence is both practical and disruptive. You are responsible for feeding and cleaning after them, while simultaneously managing the human occupants. Children learn early that animals are work as well as companionship, and that mistakes in care can be fatal for the family's survival. Water is scarce and difficult to manage. Wells may be shallow or distant, streams may be polluted, and rainwater must be collected when possible. Tasks like fetching water consume time and energy, often during the hottest part of the day or the coldest. Each drop is precious, each trip a negotiation with your environment. Sleep is brief, broken, and shared. Everyone rests in proximity both for warmth and for efficiency. Children lie alongside adults, and sometimes the sick or elderly are placed near the hearth for warmth. Night is not a private sanctuary. It is an extension of labor, punctuated by the sounds of coughing, crying, or animals stirring. Exhaustion is constant, and yet life continues minute by minute. Seasonal rhythms dictate household work as much as field labor. Winter requires preparation, stacking firewood, repairing roofs, sewing clothes, storing food. Spring brings planting indoors for seedlings, cleaning, and planning for the next harvest. Autumn harvest requires extra hands, both in the fields and inside the hut, processing what little the household can manage. These cycles never pause. They are relentless, yet predictable, a strange comfort amidst scarcity. Visitors and obligations extend into the household. Village officials may arrive to inspect food stores, enforce taxes, or collect labor. Neighbors may come seeking assistance, borrow tools, or advice. Each intrusion must be accommodated without disrupting essential routines. Privacy is limited. Autonomy is constrained. Adaptability becomes a skill as essential as cooking or repairing tools. Children's education is primarily domestic and practical. They learn to observe, imitate, and contribute. Reading and writing are rare and often irrelevant in a peasant household. Instead, they memorize instructions, recall patterns, and anticipate needs. Their training is survival-oriented, preparing them to inherit the same routine of labor that dominates the adult world. Despite the monotony, moments of connection persist. Families share meals and stories, sing hymns or folk songs, and observe religious rituals within the hut. These practices offer emotional sustenance as vital as food. They create cohesion, a shared sense of identity and resilience that allows the household to endure continual hardship. The structure itself shapes experience. Low ceilings, dark corners, and narrow spaces limit movement but concentrate attention. Life is enacted in proximity. Conflict and cooperation exist side by side. The environment teaches negotiation, patience, and endurance. Daily life becomes both a physical and psychological exercise in adaptation. And yet, despite these adaptations, one thought persists. If every corner of your home is consumed by labor, every object serves necessity, and every routine is a test of endurance, what happens when the strain, physical, emotional, or social, becomes too great for a household to bear? How fragile is life under the roof of mud and smoke, when comfort is absent and survival is relentless? As time passes, You come to understand that survival in a peasant hut is less about the structure itself and more about how you inhabit it. The walls of wattle and daub are crude. The roof leaks. The floor is cold and uneven, but the way you use the space, the habits you develop, and the routines you enforce determine whether life continues or collapses. You begin to see the hut as a dynamic system. The hearth is central not just for heat but for controlling daily activity. Meals revolve around it. Work within the home revolves around it. Even rest or play gravitates toward its warmth. Smoke rising from the fire is a constant irritant, but it also signals the rhythms of life. Cooking, tending, watching. It is as integral to existence as the walls themselves. Water, food, and fuel define priorities. Every trip to the well, every bundle of firewood, every preserved foodstuff is part of an ongoing negotiation with scarcity. Misjudgments are costly. Too little firewood means a freezing night. Too much water spent means crops dry up or children go thirsty. Small calculations, repeated daily, become second nature. These are the invisible patterns that sustain life. Hygiene is improvised but crucial. Sweeping floors, discarding waste, and tending animals carefully are as much for health as for order. Disease can strike swiftly in a cramped, smoky space, and death is often close. You learn to observe symptoms, isolate the sick when possible, and rely on herbal remedies or prayers for survival. Your understanding of illness is practical, built on experience rather than theory. Children's work is continuous and essential. Even play is instructive. They spin wool, feed animals, carry water, and help with cooking. Observation is learning. Imitation is education. By adolescence, they are nearly indistinguishable from adults in terms of contribution. Household labor is not optional, it is a family imperative. Every pair of hands matters, and every missed task is noticed, quietly or openly. Seasonal cycles dictate the internal rhythm. Summer brings long hours of tending animals indoors, spinning flax and repairing tools. Autumn is filled with preparing for harvest and storing food. Winter is dominated by indoor maintenance and ensuring survival through the cold months. Each season carries its own labor patterns, its own stressors, and its own strategies for endurance. There is no pause from work, only changes in its form. Community intrudes constantly. Villagers visit, officials collect dues, neighbors borrow or lend what is scarce. Privacy is minimal. You learn to negotiate, to host efficiently, and to manage expectations. Your home is not only a personal space but also a node in a larger network of obligations, support, and oversight. Survival is both an individual and communal project. Moments of human warmth persist even amidst these challenges. A shared meal, a quiet song, or the small laughter of children provide relief. Religious rituals and festivals, however rare, break the monotony and reinforce collective identity. These experiences, though fleeting, are psychologically vital. They sustain hope, even in the harshest circumstances. The hut is also a repository of memory. Generations live, work, and die within the same walls. Each item, tools, blankets, chests, or pottery carries history. Repairs and replacements trace the lineage of endurance. Life is cyclical, and yet ever-changing. The structure itself is a silent witness to the repeated drama of labor, survival, and familial continuity. Through decades of toil, you learn the subtle art of adaptation. You negotiate with space, with scarcity, and with authority. You measure energy, plan chores, and balance responsibilities. Every decision is framed by survival. Habits develop that carry into the next generation, influencing how children will inhabit the same walls long after your death. Ultimately, the hut teaches a stark lesson. Life is constrained, labor is constant, and comfort is rare, but resilience persists. Families endure, households adapt, and communities survive. The walls may be mud and smoke, the floors cold and uneven, but human ingenuity and routine transform the crude structure into a functioning, living space. Every small act, feeding, repairing, tending, teaching, is a victory against the harsh realities of the medieval world. And And as you step back from the daily grind, one quiet reflection lingers. The survival of a household, over decades and across generations, is a form of history itself. The lives lived in mud and smoke are not recorded in chronicles, but they form the foundation for society, shaping the rhythms, resilience, and endurance that define centuries. Without these invisible efforts, the grand castles, the battles, and the markets could not exist. Life within four walls, humble and relentless, quietly sustains the world. Story 5. Tools of Labor, Implements that Shaped Peasant Life. Every day begins and ends with your hands on tools. These objects are extensions of your body, conduits of survival, and the instruments that define the limits of your labor. A plow, a hoe, a sickle, each is heavy, worn, and essential. They do not merely make work possible, they shape how work is done, who survives, and what the land can yield. Understanding them is understanding life itself. The plow is the most visible and demanding of these implements. Early mornings are spent yoking oxen or horses to its wooden frame, adjusting the blade to the density of the soil. The weight presses against your shoulders as you guide it through furrows. The earth resists, heavy with rain or baked hard by drought. Each pass is an act of negotiation, you, the animal, and the ground working in concert or in conflict. A poorly guided plow can ruin a season's sowing. A well-driven one might secure survival. Hand tools multiply your labor. A hoe scratches weeds, loosens soil, and prepares beds for seeds. A sickle cuts grain efficiently, but requires repetitive motion that gnaws at your hands and arms. Even small tools demand skill. Improper use can lead to injury, and injuries are dangerous in a world without reliable medicine. Your body becomes adapted to these motions, scarred and calloused. Each mark a record of countless hours spent shaping the land. Other implements, rakes, spades, scythes, serve specialized purposes. Rakes gather hay or smooth fields. Spades dig drainage ditches or burial trenches. Scythes harvest large swaths of grain during the autumn frenzy. Each has its rhythm and technique. Mastery comes slowly, through repetition, observation, and imitation of older workers who have survived longer than you. Mistakes are costly. Efficiency can mean the difference between surplus and famine. Tools are also precious commodities. You cannot afford to replace them often. They are maintained meticulously. Iron blades are sharpened, wooden handles repaired or reinforced. A broken tool is more than inconvenience. It is risk, scarcity, and potential disaster. Every item in your hands carries economic as well as practical weight. The loss of a plow may postpone sowing. The loss of a sickle may jeopardize harvest. A life can hinge on craftsmanship, care, and foresight. Children learn the significance of tools early. Before adolescence, they are tasked with lighter implements, small hoes, wooden spades, rakes for gathering straw. These exercises teach not just technique, but endurance, responsibility, and respect. Mishandling a tool teaches consequences immediately: spilled grain, broken fences, or personal injury. These lessons shape character as much as skill. Tools also mediate your relationship with time and season. A well-maintained plow can allow sowing in optimal windows, while a dull blade or broken implement can delay planting, inviting disaster. Efficiency in labor is not merely convenience, it is survival. The rhythm of life follows the rhythm of the tools. They determine how much can be accomplished in a day, in a season, and across years. Even non-agricultural tools, axes, hammers, needles, spinning wheels are essential. Axes split firewood for warmth and cooking. Hammers and chisels repair buildings, fences, and carts. Needles and awls mend clothing and harnesses. Spinning wheels transform raw fiber into thread and cloth, enabling both clothing and trade. Each implements a skill set that is learned by doing, often under the supervision of family or neighbors who have endured longer and learned more. Ownership of tools carries social and economic implications. A family with more or better implements can work more land, process more grain, or sell more products. Scarcity of tools limits opportunity and increases dependence on neighbors or lords. Shared resources become a negotiation. You may borrow a sickle or lend a plow, but trust and obligation govern these exchanges. Every tool carries social as well as practical weight. The tools themselves shape the body over time. Shoulders broaden, backs bend, hands blister and scar. Motion patterns become second nature. Limbs remember the labor even when fatigue sets in. Your muscles, joints, and endurance are molded by the implements you wield daily. Injury or loss of skill carries consequences beyond the physical. It threatens your ability to feed and protect your household. Tools are also cultural artifacts. Their forms reflect centuries of adaptation. The shape of a plow blade designed for clay versus sandy soil, the curvature of a sickle suited to rye versus wheat, the angle of a spade tailored for digging graves or ditches. These are not arbitrary. They encode accumulated knowledge and survival wisdom. Learning to use them properly is a rite of passage, a transmission of practical history from one generation to the next. And as you labor day after day, hour after hour, you may recognize a quiet truth. Survival is not merely about strength or endurance, it is about skill, adaptation, and respect for the implements that mediate your life. Each tool in your hands is a contract with the land, with time, and with your own body. How you use them defines not only your day, but the health, survival, and legacy of your family. Even as your hands ache, your back stiffens, and fatigue accumulates, a lingering thought persists. If your life, labor, and very survival are entwined with these simple tools, what happens when the tools fail, are lost, or are insufficient for the demands placed upon them? How fragile is the human system when its instruments are finite, and its endurance is stretched to the limit? By the time you have spent years in the fields, your relationship with your tools is intimate. They are not inert objects. They have personality, quirks, and limitations. A plow that is slightly warped in its frame cuts differently. A sickle with a nix along the blade demands careful movement to avoid injury. You learn to read each implement as a craftsman reads a familiar instrument, adjusting your body, pace, and effort to extract the maximum efficiency. This skill is invisible to outsiders, but essential to survival. Seasonal rhythms dictate tool use as much as labor. In spring, the plow and hoe dominate your days. You guide oxen across heavy furrows, feel the resistance of wet soil beneath the blade, and adjust continuously to variations in texture and depth. Every misstep risks wasted seed or damaged soil structure, which can compromise the harvest. Every precise motion increases efficiency and reduces unnecessary fatigue. You measure your endurance against the weight of wood and iron, learning patience and technique in equal measure. Summer brings the sickle and scythe. Harvesting grain is no small task. You bend, swing, and cut with repetitive precision, your movements choreographed over years. The rhythm is physically punishing, yet it is also meditative. You come to anticipate the grain's resistance, the curve of stalks, the best angles to maximize yield. Fatigue is constant, but practice transforms the chore into a survival art, where attention to detail is as important as brute strength. Maintenance is as crucial as labor itself. Iron blades must be sharpened, wooden handles inspected for cracks, ropes replaced, and joints oiled. A dull tool is dangerous and inefficient. Neglect carries immediate consequences. A broken handle can cost a life in a field accident. A blunt sickle slows harvesting and risks spoilage. Knowledge of repair and care is passed down quietly through observation and imitation. Skillful upkeep multiplies productivity and extends life expectancy, both human and instrument. Tools are not only physical but social connectors. Families and neighbors share implements when scarcity demands it. You may lend a plow in return for labor on your land, or borrow a sickle to harvest quickly. These exchanges are governed by trust, obligation, and necessity. Borrowing improperly can strain relationships or invite punishment from the Lord. The tools themselves mediate the social fabric, silently binding people together through cooperation and mutual dependence. Children begin learning early. By age 7 or 8, they practice with scaled-down versions of adult tools. Small hoes, miniature sickles, and light spades teach rhythm, precision, and respect. These lessons are less about accomplishment and more about habituation. By adolescence, the skills are second nature. Mistakes are immediate and instructive. Dropped grain, damaged fences, or scraped skin teach consequences before theory ever could. Learning tools is learning life. The tools themselves evolve over time, reflecting both human ingenuity and environmental constraints. Plowshares are adapted for clay soil, scythes curved for rye versus wheat, hammers shaped for particular construction tasks. Local blacksmiths are indispensable, not just for repair but for innovation. Even subtle differences, weight distribution, handle length, curvature matter profoundly. Knowledge of these variations spreads quietly, orally, and by observation, creating a living archive of practical engineering. Labor mediated by tools also shapes the body. Repetitive motions condition muscles and joints, but also cause wear and tear. Blisters, calluses, and scars tell a story of decades of exertion. You carry the history of your work on your body, inextricable from the tools you wield. A hand scarred by a plow is both a mark of labor and a record of survival. Tools also impose mental discipline. Precision, foresight, and calculation are necessary for effective use. The wrong stroke of a scythe can ruin harvest. The misaligned plow can destroy a seedbed. You develop anticipatory thinking, where the soil is hardest, where weeds cluster, where the oxen resist. Each tool teaches observation and judgment, shaping not only labor but cognition. Survival is technical as well as physical. Even in moments of exhaustion, the rhythm of tools provides a kind of meditation. Swinging a sickle repeatedly, guiding a plow through furrows, repairing a roof, trust these actions, though physically taxing, give structure to an otherwise precarious life. The familiar weight in your hands is both burden and comfort, a constant amid uncertainty, a reminder that survival is possible through skill, endurance, and adaptation. And as you reflect on the cumulative impact of these implements, you recognize a larger truth. Human labor and tools are inseparable. The fate of individuals, households, and entire communities depends not only on the earth they work but on the instruments they master. Yet this dependence carries vulnerability. When tools fail, when scarcity limits replacement, when innovation is slow, human resilience is tested to its limits. Survival is both enabled and constrained by the very instruments you rely upon. By the end of a lifetime, the tools you have wielded are more than instruments, they are extensions of memory, endurance, and adaptation. Every scratch, nick, and patch tells a story. The autumn when the plowshare broke just before planting, the winter when you repaired a hoe handle by candlelight, the harvest when a scythe's curve let you gather grain faster than ever before. These objects carry the history of human effort, surviving long after individual bodies tire or die. The cumulative effect of tool use extends far beyond the household. Efficient plowing, careful weeding, and precise harvesting determine the survival of families, the stability of villages, and the wealth of the Lord's estate. Each tool is a linchpin in a larger network. One sickle may save a harvest. One sharp plowshare may secure enough grain to feed a village for months. Human labor and material implements are inseparable in shaping medieval life. Tools also create intergenerational knowledge. Children who assist in the fields, repair implements, or observe skilled laborers inherit practical wisdom. They understand soil density, crop cycles, and the weight of effort before they can read or write. Techniques, modifications, and tips are transmitted orally or by demonstration, forming a living archive of practical history. Each household becomes a repository of survival knowledge encoded in wood, iron, and human muscle memory. Scarcity amplifies the significance of tools. A broken plow or dull sickle is not merely inconvenient, it is potentially catastrophic. You calculate its usage carefully, ration repair materials, and prioritize what must be done to protect both tool and harvest. These calculations are invisible to outsiders, but they shape the rhythm of labor and the success of survival. In some regions, tools reflect local innovation. Blacksmiths and carpenters modify designs to suit soil, climate, or crop type. Even minor adjustments, a slightly heavier blade, a longer handle, a reinforced joint can dramatically improve efficiency. This localized ingenuity demonstrates the interplay between human ingenuity and environmental demands. Survival is both learned and engineered. The human body is molded by tools as well. Muscles, joints, and posture adapt to repeated motions. Backs become strong from plowing, hands scarred and calloused from gripping handles. Over decades, this physical adaptation becomes second nature, invisible to those unfamiliar with manual labor. Yet the body is also fragile. Injury, fatigue, or overuse can cripple not only labor capacity but also survival itself. Tools mediate social and economic relationships. Borrowing a sickle or lending a plow involves trust, obligation, and reciprocity. A family with access to more or better implements may dominate labor arrangements, harvest faster, or trade more effectively. Tools define opportunity, influence social standing, and shape the structure of village economies. They are objects, yes, but also symbols and instruments of power within the peasant world. Over time, mastery of tools fosters autonomy within constraints. The experienced laborer develops strategies to maximize efficiency, minimize risk, and protect both self and household. These strategies are subtle, cumulative, and rarely documented in chronicles, yet they sustain survival. Human resilience is intertwined with material culture in a way that is both practical and profound. Even as you grow older, you respect the tools as constant companions. They remind you of seasons endured, decisions made, and lives sustained. When a plow fails or a scythe dulls, the consequences are immediate and tangible, reinforcing the dependency between human skill and material instruments. Each tool is a bridge between labor, survival, and memory. Finally, you realize the deeper lesson. The peasant's world, often dismissed as monotonous or insignificant, is defined as much by tools as by labor. The implements in your hands are not passive. They shape time, productivity, social relations, physical development, and even cognition. Survival, endurance, and legacy are inseparable from the objects that mediate daily life. And as you reflect on this interdependence, a quiet thought persists. If life, labor, and survival are entwined so completely with tools, what happens when innovation slows, resources become scarce, or environmental pressures exceed human and material capacity? History is written in chronicles and annals, but the invisible record, the sweat, scars, and skill forged in wood and iron, often tells a more crucial story. The endurance of ordinary people, mediated through their tools, forms the backbone of society in ways both unseen and indispensable. Story 6. Villages in motion, migration, markets, and medieval mobility. You may imagine a medieval village as fixed, permanent, rooted in the same fields and homes for generations. But in truth, movement is constant, subtle, and often driven by survival rather than choice. The medieval landscape is not static. It is a network of villages, roads, and market towns, with peasants, craftsmen, and laborers moving in response to opportunity, obligation, and necessity. Migration rarely happens dramatically. You do not see entire villages uprooted overnight. Instead, families move gradually, one household at a time, guided by need. Land may be depleted after years of cultivation, crops fail repeatedly, or obligations to a lord become too onerous. A young adult leaves to find work elsewhere. A widowed mother follows her children. Over decades, the patterns of movement reshape the population across regions, subtly but decisively. Markets are central to this mobility. Even the most isolated village is connected to nearby towns through trade. Surplus grain, dairy, wool, or crafted goods is exchanged for salt, iron, cloth, or other essentials. The frequency of market trips depends on distance, season, and obligations. For the peasant, a journey to market is more than economic. It is social and informational. You learn news, gossip, prices, and trends, all of which influence survival strategies. Roads, though rudimentary, form arteries of connectivity. Dirt tracks become mud in rain, dust in summer. Crossing rivers may require ferries or temporary bridges. Travel is never safe. Thieves, wild animals, and exposure to weather all pose risks. Yet movement is essential. The village's survival depends on access to goods, information, and labor opportunities beyond its borders. Temporary labor migration is common. Peasants leave their home village to work on distant estates, participate in harvests, or provide seasonal labor for towns and monasteries. These journeys allow households to supplement scarce resources. Payment may be in food, wages, or deferred obligations. Returning home, laborers bring back not only earnings but knowledge, techniques, ideas, and information about alternative survival strategies. Migration is also tied to social pressures. Marriage, inheritance, and disputes can force movement. Young adults may leave to find unclaimed land or avoid familial tension. Widows or orphans may be relocated under the supervision of the lord or kin. Social mobility, limited as it is inseparable from geographic mobility. Moving is a strategy as much as a necessity, shaped by law, custom, and survival. Obligations sometimes compel movement. Lords require labor on distant holdings, or impose rents that force households to supplement income elsewhere. Tithes, market taxes, and corvée labor extend beyond the village, pulling peasants into broader regional economies. Mobility becomes entwined with authority. You travel not solely by choice, but in response to layered demands from both survival and governance. Markets themselves are dynamic. Prices fluctuate with harvests, wars, and trade disruptions. You may travel miles to sell surplus at a favorable price, only to return to find local scarcity has made essential goods expensive. Each trip requires calculation, time spent, resources expended, and potential gains weighed carefully. Efficiency is survival. A misjudged journey can leave a family short of both food and tools. Migration also affects demographics. Villages may shrink or swell as households leave, return, or settle permanently elsewhere. Labor distribution changes, sometimes subtly undermining a lord's authority or reinforcing community cooperation. Seasonal patterns produce predictable fluctuations, while unexpected crises, famine, disease, or conflict trigger rapid, sometimes permanent, relocations. Social knowledge spreads along these routes. Techniques for cultivation, weaving, animal care, or tool repair travel with laborers and merchants. Villages borrow ideas from neighbors, sometimes adopting new methods or crops. Mobility is not just economic, it is a vector for survival wisdom, a quiet diffusion of practical knowledge. Yet movement is constrained. Roads are dangerous, lords may restrict passage, markets may be inaccessible, and families cannot afford to leave entirely. Decisions are calculated. How far can you go without endangering your household? What risks are acceptable to secure necessary resources? Every journey involves negotiation between desire, necessity, and risk. Within this network of movement, the village is both fixed and fluid. Houses, fields, and obligations anchor you locally, while roads, markets, and seasonal labor pull you outward. You exist simultaneously as a resident and as a traveler, negotiating survival in multiple spaces at once. Mobility is less an adventure than a constant calculation, a matter of endurance, judgment, and opportunity. And as you reflect on this slow, often invisible motion, families leaving, laborers traveling, markets shifting, you confront a question that haunts survival in a medieval world. If movement is both a necessity and a risk, how do people decide when to stay, when to leave, and when to risk everything on the road between villages and markets? Life beyond the homestead is a constant negotiation between necessity and danger. Roads that connect villages to towns, markets, and distant estates are lifelines, but they are also unpredictable, hazardous spaces. You may leave before dawn, carrying sacks of grain, bundles of wool, or handcrafted goods, aware that every step carries risk. A twisted ankle on an uneven track, sudden storms, bandits, or the threat of being conscripted into unpaid labor by a passing noble's retinue. Survival requires preparation, judgment, and endurance. Travel is slow. A day's journey might cover 10 or 15 miles if the terrain is forgiving, less if mud, hills, or rivers intervene. Children may accompany adults, carrying lighter loads, learning the rhythms of movement and the skills of observation that will serve them later. Families plan these excursions carefully. What can be carried, what must be left, and how to minimize exposure to hazards. Even minor miscalculations can compromise a household's survival. Markets are the purpose of many journeys, but they are unpredictable. Prices fluctuate with harvests, crop failures, war, or disease. You may arrive to sell wheat, only to find prices depressed by surplus or high because of scarcity elsewhere. Transporting goods carries opportunity costs. Time spent traveling is time lost for labor on your own land. Decisions involve constant calculation: what to sell, when to sell, and what risks can be tolerated in pursuit of profit or sustenance. Temporary migration for labor amplifies these calculations. You may travel to another lord's estate during peak harvest, hopping for wages in grain or coin. Work is physically demanding, often mirroring the intensity of your home estate, and yet it is also a lifeline. The choices you make: how far to go, how long to stay, which opportunities to accept, determine not just income but survival. Risk is constant. Injury, theft, or sickness far from home can be fatal, yet the reward may be the only path to sustenance for your family. Mobility is also shaped by social structures. Travel is rarely free or unobserved. Lords control passage, enforce tolls, and collect taxes. Officials may stop travelers to verify obligations or demand labor. Permissions are sometimes informal, dependent on local custom, relationships, or payment. Movement requires negotiation, tact, and awareness of social hierarchies. The road is not neutral. It is a social as well as physical landscape. Even short journeys bring new knowledge. Markets expose you to new goods, methods of production, and news of distant regions. You observe tools, crops, clothing, and animal husbandry techniques unknown in your village. Traders and itinerant craftsmen introduce innovations gradually, creating a subtle diffusion of practical knowledge across regions. Travel becomes education, even if survival is the primary motive. Yet danger is omnipresent. Bandits lie in wooded stretches. Rivers and bridges can be treacherous. Travelers are vulnerable to accidents and illness, and without immediate assistance, even minor injuries may be fatal. Preparation is key. Traveling in groups, carrying simple tools for repair or first aid, knowing safe paths and alternate routes. Every step is measured against risk, and every decision carries consequences for the household left behind. Seasons dictate mobility. Spring brings planting obligations. Summer, grazing or tending distant fields. Autumn, harvest migration. Winter, limited movement but critical tasks such as trading surplus, repairing tools, or tending livestock elsewhere. Timing is crucial. A misaligned journey can result in lost income, spoiled goods, or missed labor obligations. Coordination with family, neighbors, and lords is an ongoing challenge. Over time, patterns of mobility become ingrained. You recognize which roads are safest, which markets are most reliable, which estates offer work without exploitation. Experience and observation teach not only survival but strategy. Children accompanying adults internalize these lessons, gaining skills that are as practical as literacy or numeracy skills essential for survival in a world defined by distance, labor, and authority. Migration, both temporary and permanent, reshapes communities. Some villages shrink as families leave. Others grow as laborers arrive. Labor distribution, social hierarchies, and economic opportunities shift accordingly. The movement of people is a silent force, invisible in official records but crucial to the functioning of the medieval economy and the survival of households. And yet, with all this calculation, one thought lingers. In a world where movement is necessary for survival, yet dangerous and uncertain, how do individuals and families decide when to leave, when to stay, and when to risk everything on roads fraught with hazards they can neither control nor fully anticipate. Over time, you come to realize that movement is not just a means of survival, it reshapes everything about village life. Roads, markets, and migration are more than physical conduits. They are mechanisms through which knowledge, labor, and resources flow, quietly altering social structures and even the environment itself. The decisions you make to travel or to stay affect not just your household, but the balance of entire communities. Temporary labor migration, though common, has far-reaching implications. A young adult may leave for weeks or months to harvest grain on a distant estate, returning home with both sustenance and experience. Their absence creates gaps in domestic labor that other household members must fill. Children may assume adult responsibilities. Elderly relatives may take on tasks normally outside their strength. The household becomes a dynamic system, redistributing labor in response to movement and scarcity. Survival depends on flexibility as much as endurance. Permanent migration is even more consequential. Families who leave for new lands or towns change the demographics of villages. Fields may be left fallow, labor resources diminish, and social networks are disrupted. New arrivals may bring different customs, farming techniques, or craft skills, subtly shifting the culture and economy of the receiving village. Migration is a slow but relentless force of change, as invisible as the wind yet as tangible as a freshly plowed field. Markets magnify these effects. Trade connects villages to distant regions, creating dependency on external resources. Prices fluctuate with harvests, wars, or epidemics far away. A village that relies heavily on market trade must respond quickly to these changes, storing surplus grain, adjusting production, or traveling further afield. Economic decisions, though made at the household level, ripple outward, influencing supply and demand across regions. Mobility, in essence, links micro decisions to macro outcomes. Movement also affects authority. Lords and officials depend on the labor of peasants, and their ability to enforce obligations diminishes when people are mobile. Labor scarcity or selective migration grants households subtle bargaining power, delaying corvée labor, negotiating rents, or withholding surplus goods. Mobility becomes a quiet check on rigid hierarchies, an assertion of agency within an otherwise constraining system. Yet risks remain constant. Roads are treacherous, disease can follow travelers, and theft or exploitation is always possible. Some who leave never return, lost to accident, illness, or economic failure. Families left behind bear the consequences: labor shortages, diminished harvests, or social instability. Every journey carries a shadow, a reminder that survival is never guaranteed, even when movement offers opportunity. Mobility also carries cultural and technological consequences. A laborer returning from a distant estate may introduce new techniques for plowing, animal husbandry, or tool repair. A market visit may expose villagers to imported goods, altering diets, clothing, or craft styles. These incremental changes, often undocumented in formal chronicles, accumulate over generations, transforming the practical knowledge and material culture of entire regions. Migration is a vector for adaptation, as important as labor or agriculture in shaping medieval life. Children growing up in this system internalize lessons of geography, negotiation, and survival. They learn to anticipate the movements of people and goods, understand the timing of seasonal labor, and judge the risks of roads and rivers. Knowledge of distant markets, neighboring villages, and local geography becomes as critical as mastery of tools or cultivation techniques. Survival is spatial as well as temporal. Knowing when and where to move is as important as knowing how to plow a field or repair a roof. Ultimately, the medieval village is neither fixed nor isolated. It is a node within a network of movement, shaped by migration, markets, and labor mobility. Households adapt, negotiate, and endure, constantly recalibrating their position in space and time. Authority, resources, and survival are interdependent, and the rhythms of movement define the very texture of daily life. And as you step back from the roads, the markets, and the distant fields, one reflection remains. The medieval world was sustained not just by the laborers who tilled the soil, but by their movement, the calculated, risky, and continuous motion of people negotiating survival. Without this mobility, knowledge would stagnate, labor would falter, and the village itself could not endure. The silent circulation of bodies, goods, and information is as fundamental to history as the battles and decrees recorded in chronicles, and yet it often goes unnoticed. The survival of ordinary people, in motion across the landscape, quietly shaped the medieval world in ways no single document can capture. Story 7. Feasts, Famine, and Flavor, the Real Diet of Peasants. You sit at the edge of the table, or more accurately, a rough-hewn plank across two stools, hungry, weary, and aware that every meal is a negotiation with scarcity. Your diet is dictated less by taste and more by what the land and season provide. In the medieval village, food is a measure of survival, a rhythm that shapes the day, the week, and the year. Understanding what passes through your hands and onto your table is essential to understanding life itself. Bread dominates. It is both sustenance and social marker. The type of bread you eat, coarse, dark, mixed with barley, rye, or even acorn, signals your status and access to resources. White wheat bread is rare, reserved for lords, wealthy townspeople, or special occasions. Your bread is dense, sometimes gritty, often baked in communal ovens. You eat it daily, not for pleasure, but because it sustains labor, absorbs pottage, and prevents hunger from overwhelming your body. Pottage is the constant companion to bread. A thick stew of grains, legumes, and occasionally vegetables, it is simmered over the hearth for hours. Ingredients are variable: onions, leeks, beans, cabbage, turnips, or carrots, depending on season and local availability. Meat is scarce and often only included when a domestic animal is slaughtered for necessity or a feast occurs. Spices are rare luxuries, imported and expensive, so flavor is muted, relying on herbs or salt if available. Yet pottage nourishes, warms, and fills qualities more essential than taste. The calendar dictates food availability. Spring brings fresh greens, herbs, and the first shoots of crops. Summer offers berries, beans, and vegetables, along with milk and eggs from domestic animals. Autumn is harvest time, when stored grains, preserved fruits, and root vegetables ensure survival through the winter months. Winter is a period of scarcity. Stored food must be rationed carefully. The rhythm of hunger and abundance shapes not just diet, but behavior, labor, and social interaction. Preservation is a constant concern. Grains are stored in sacks or bins, carefully protected from moisture, rodents, and mold. Vegetables are salted, dried, or buried in pits. Meat is smoked or boiled repeatedly. Fish is salted. Spoilage is a real threat. A failed preservation can mean days without sustenance. Every household develops strategies for maximizing longevity of stored food, from layering straw to covering with animal hides, to relying on communal knowledge passed down for generations. Animal products are intermittent. Milk, cheese, and eggs supplement the grain-based diet. Meat appears rarely and usually under practical circumstances. A slaughtered goat, pig, or chicken provides temporary abundance. Hunting is limited and often controlled by lords. Fish may be available near rivers, lakes, or ponds, but access is seasonal and regulated. Nutrition is pragmatic, not indulgent. Survival is a calculation of calories and availability rather than flavor. Foraging complements cultivated food. Berries, nuts, mushrooms, and herbs are gathered when accessible. Knowledge of which plants are edible, medicinal, or poisonous is essential. Children learn these lessons early. The forest, fields, and hedgerows are classrooms where survival knowledge is encoded. Missing a key ingredient or mistaking a plant can mean illness or starvation. Cooking is labor-intensive. Water must be collected, fires maintained, pots stirred for hours. Every action consumes energy, yet energy is required to perform labor in the fields, repair tools, and maintain the household. Meals are intertwined with labor. Cooking itself is a form of work, not relaxation. There is no clear boundary between feeding the body and sustaining the capacity for labor. Each calorie consumed is a calculated investment. Meals also reinforce social hierarchy and family structure. Adults eat first, children last. The oldest or strongest may take precedence. Portions are rationed carefully. Every scrap matters. Sharing is necessary but strategic. Meals are communal but constrained, with constant attention to what remains for future labor or unforeseen shortages. And yet, hunger is never fully assuaged. You learn to manage appetite as much as intake, to stretch small amounts of food across days, to combine ingredients in ways that maximize satiety. Famine, when it occurs, is merciless. Even minor crop failures produce long-lasting consequences, reducing energy for labor, increasing susceptibility to illness, and threatening the household's survival. Food in the peasant world is practical, variable, and fraught with risk. Flavor is incidental. Nutrition and preservation dominate. Every meal is the product of effort, planning, and adaptation, reflecting the broader conditions of medieval life. What you eat and how you prepare it is inseparable from work, social status, and the environment. And as you break the crust of dense bread, stir the pottage, and share it with family, one thought persists. If your survival depends on the careful management of grain, vegetables, and occasional animal products, what happens when crop failure, scarcity, or illness disrupts this fragile balance? How does a household endure when the rhythm of food itself falters? Survival in a medieval village is a constant negotiation with scarcity. Your diet is never abundant, and each season brings its own challenges. Spring may offer fresh greens and herbs, but winter stores from the previous autumn must be rationed carefully to avoid starvation. Meals are structured around what is available, and improvisation is constant. Even the simplest pottage can be a carefully balanced calculation of calories, water, and ingredients stretched to feed a household. Bread remains the foundation of sustenance. Coarse rye or barley loaves dominate, baked in communal ovens if available. The quality varies with season and harvest. The worst years produce dense, bitter loaves, sometimes mixed with bran, legumes, or acorns. White wheat bread is a luxury, eaten primarily by lords or on festive occasions. Bread is more than food. It is the measure of survival. You count loaves, ration slices, and sometimes rely on stale crumbs to supplement meals. It is a constant, physical reminder of scarcity. Pottage is both a source of nutrition and a tool for rationing. A pot may simmer for hours, combining grains, vegetables, and the occasional herbs or bones. Meat is rare. When it appears, it is usually a byproduct of necessity, slaughtering an old pig, a dying goat, or an animal too weak to survive the winter. Even fish, when accessible, is not abundant, and preservation techniques are essential. Salted or smoked, these items extend sustenance beyond the day they are acquired. Seasonal preservation is central to survival. Grain is stored in sacks or bins, protected from moisture, rodents, and mold. Vegetables and fruits are dried, pickled, or buried in pits. Herbs may be dried for flavor or medicine. Failure to preserve properly can mean weeks of hunger or malnutrition. Peasants develop careful routines, inspecting storage, rotating stock, and repairing containers. The household operates like a finely tuned system where food management is as critical as cultivation. Children participate in these tasks from a young age. They learn which roots are edible, how to harvest herbs without depleting future supplies, and how to store food safely. Knowledge is practical and transmitted through observation and repetition. A child who learns the rhythm of preservation is not just assisting. They are acquiring survival skills that will carry into adulthood. Even ordinary meals carry layers of social meaning. Adults eat first, ensuring that those responsible for labor and decision-making are sustained. Children and the elderly receive what remains. Sharing and rationing are constant considerations. Every meal involves a balance between immediate hunger and future survival. A family that mismanages its resources may face prolonged hardship, particularly during poor harvests or harsh winters. Labor and diet are inseparable. You must consume enough calories to perform field work, repair tools, maintain shelters, and tend animals. Energy expenditure is constant, yet calories are scarce. Overexertion without sufficient food leads to fatigue, illness, and vulnerability. Each day involves a delicate balance. How much to work, how much to eat, and how to conserve resources for unforeseen challenges. Famine, when it strikes, is devastating. Even a single failed harvest can produce months of hunger, weakening the household, reducing labor efficiency, and increasing susceptibility to disease. Families may supplement rations with foraging berries, nuts, mushrooms, or by reducing consumption drastically. Children often suffer first, as adults prioritize the survival of those capable of sustaining labor. Famine teaches harsh lessons. Survival depends not only on effort, but also on the ability to adapt to scarcity and anticipate future needs. Festivals and religious observances punctuate these rhythms. Special foods may appear on feast days: pork, bread made with more refined flour, or small quantities of imported spices, but these moments are rare. Even in celebration, food is measured and shared carefully. Luxury is temporary, constrained by the demands of everyday survival. Meals are symbolic as well as practical. They reinforce community, faith, and the fragile hierarchy of scarcity. And yet, the peasant diet is not entirely grim. Familiar flavors, repetitive though they are, provide continuity. Herbs, seasonal vegetables, and occasional dairy products create subtle variety. Preparation and presentation, though minimal, carry meaning. Sharing a meal reinforces family bonds and maintains morale, even in hardship. These small joys sustain life in ways that are invisible to chronicles but essential to survival. Ultimately, food is both a measure and a mediator of peasant life. It dictates labor, shapes social structures, and governs the rhythm of the household. Every loaf of bread, every spoonful of pottage, every preserved vegetable carries weight far beyond nutrition. It is a record of labor, ingenuity, and endurance. And as you observe the delicate balance of scarcity, seasonality, and survival, one question remains. When famine strikes, when crops fail, or when disease decimates the household, what choices remain for those whose daily existence is dictated by the availability of bread, pottage, and the faint hope of sustenance? As the seasons cycle, you realize that food is never just sustenance. It is ritual, culture, and survival strategy woven together. Even in the harshest years, when bread is coarse and pottage thin, the act of preparing, sharing, and consuming meals shapes the household and the village. The diet of peasants is as much about endurance as it is about taste, reflecting a life negotiated between scarcity, labor, and tradition. Feasts and festivals punctuate the rhythm of survival. Saints' days, harvest celebrations, and religious holidays bring rare indulgence: a richer loaf, a roasted piglet, or a sprinkling of imported spices. These occasions, though infrequent, serve as communal markers, reinforcing relationships within the village and connecting the household to broader social and religious structures. Even when quantities are small, the shared experience affirms continuity, resilience, and identity. Cooking and meal preparation remain labor-intensive. Water must be carried, firewood gathered, and pots tended carefully. Ingredients are limited, so improvisation is crucial. Substitutions are routine. Roots and legumes replace meat, dried herbs enhance flavor, and stale bread may be reconstituted into pottage. Household survival depends on ingenuity as much as availability. Adaptation is constant. Learning to stretch resources is a skill passed quietly from parent to child. Children from a young age internalize these lessons. They learn which plants are edible, how to store grains safely, and how to prepare simple dishes. Even playful activities like stirring a pot or collecting herbs serve as practical education. Nutrition, preservation, and culinary technique are inseparable in daily life. In these tasks, the household cultivates not only survival skills but also a shared culture of labor, taste, and care. Animal husbandry supplements the diet, though it is constrained by necessity. Cows, goats, and pigs provide milk, cheese, or meat, but slaughter is limited to necessity or celebration. Chickens provide eggs, while bees occasionally offer honey. These contributions are carefully rationed. Food from animals is not indulgence. It is a calculated extension of survival. Every egg or drop of milk is evaluated against household needs, labor requirements, and future scarcity. Markets extend the household's diet and knowledge. Traveling to sell surplus grain or crafts provides access to salt, spices, dried fish, and other goods otherwise unavailable. Prices fluctuate, requiring careful assessment. These journeys also bring news of distant lands, techniques, and crops. What you consume and how is shaped by local availability, distant markets, and the broader economy. Food becomes both sustenance and connection to the larger medieval world. Famine and scarcity leave a permanent mark on household routines. During lean years, portions are strictly rationed, pottage becomes thinner, and improvisation is essential. Communities develop informal systems. Neighbors share excess, lend grain, or pool labor to prevent collapse. Survival depends on both individual skill and social cooperation. Scarcity teaches lessons that shape behavior long after the immediate crisis passes. Despite hardship, meals carry meaning. Sharing food reinforces family cohesion, marks social bonds, and sustains morale. The act of eating together, however humble, becomes ritualized. Bread broken collectively, pottage stirred and served carefully, portions allocated with consideration. Survival is not only physical but social. Meals are a medium for continuity, teaching, and resilience. Nutrition is pragmatic but not devoid of variety. Seasonal herbs, vegetables, milk, and occasional meats introduce flavor. Techniques such as boiling, roasting, drying, and fermenting extend the life of ingredients and create subtle variations. These small adaptations reflect accumulated knowledge and ingenuity, lessons passed through generations without written record but etched in practice. Ultimately, the peasant diet is a lens through which survival, labor, and culture converge. Bread, pottage, and seasonal foods are more than calories. They are a record of human adaptation, negotiation, and resilience. Daily meals structure life, regulate labor, and sustain households physically and socially. Food is the invisible backbone of the medieval world, linking labor, knowledge, community, and endurance. And as you reflect on the relentless balance of scarcity and survival, one thought remains. When daily existence depends on careful management of grain, vegetables, and occasional animal products, what becomes of a household when the fragile equilibrium is broken by famine, plague, or social upheaval? And how does a family endure when the very rhythm of food itself falters? Story 8. Work, Rest, and Ritual, the Rhythms of Medieval Labor. Your day begins before the sun rises. Even in winter, when frost bites and darkness lingers, labor calls you to the fields, the barn, or the workshop. The medieval peasant does not work only when convenient. Work is dictated by necessity, the seasons, and the demands of survival. Every action, from the heaviest plow stroke to the smallest repair of a tool, is part of a carefully orchestrated rhythm that structures life itself. The first light reveals the scope of labor. You must tend animals feeding, milking, cleaning stalls before breakfast. Chickens require grain, pigs must be checked, goats milked, and cows brought in from pasture. Neglect can be fatal. A hungry animal produces less milk, becomes weak, or may die, reducing the household's food supply. Children are often assigned lighter tasks, gathering eggs, carrying water, or sweeping the floor. The household functions as a microcosm of cooperation, each member's labor intertwined with the survival of all. Fields demand constant attention. Plowing, sowing, weeding, and harvesting are physically punishing tasks. Seasons dictate the type of labor. Spring is planting, summer, tending, autumn, harvesting, winter, repair, and preparation. Every motion is purposeful. The rhythm of your work mirrors the rhythm of the land. You learn to read the soil, anticipate weather changes, and adjust your efforts accordingly. Failure to align labor with the land's natural cycles can result in lost harvests and hunger. The labor is relentless but punctuated by ritual. Prayer, blessings, and brief pauses mark the day. Before a field is plowed, a simple invocation may be offered for fertility. At meal times, hands are washed, and thanks are given for food. Even small acts, a shared sip of water, a whispered greeting to a neighbor, are reminders that labor is embedded in a web of social and spiritual expectations. Work is never purely physical, it is cultural and communal. Tools mediate every task. The plow, hoe, scythe, and sickle dictate how labor is performed. Mastery of these implements is not optional, it is essential for survival. Each tool requires skill, strength, and endurance. The body is shaped over years of repetitive motion. Hands blistered and scarred, back bent from plowing, shoulders hardened by labor. The physical rhythms of work are intertwined with survival, shaping both body and mind. Labor extends beyond the individual. Communal obligations, repairing the Lord's roads, tending shared fields, or constructing fences, consume significant portions of the week. These tasks are often mandatory, unpaid, and physically demanding. Cooperation and coordination become survival skills. A village that works together can complete essential projects efficiently, while households that fail to meet obligations risk punishment, fines, or social ostracism. Labor is simultaneously personal, familial, and collective. Rest is limited but necessary. Meals, short pauses in the shade, and occasional evening respite are precious. Sleep is communal and functional. Everyone lies together for warmth, often on straw mats or simple pallets. Exhaustion is a constant companion, yet the day begins again with the same unyielding rhythm. Labor, rest, and nourishment form a cycle in which continuity is more important than comfort or leisure. Seasonal variation introduces unpredictability. Frost, drought, or rain can alter the daily schedule dramatically. Heavy rainfall may halt plowing. A sudden heat wave can weaken livestock. An unexpected storm may destroy stored grain. You learn flexibility, adjusting labor hours and priorities in response to environmental conditions. The peasant day is rigid in expectation, but requires constant adaptation to reality. Children and apprentices learn the rhythms through imitation. Observation is as crucial as instruction. By watching adults work the fields, tend animals, or repair tools, they internalize patterns of effort, timing, and technique. Mistakes have immediate consequences: spilled seed, broken fences, wasted fuel, but they also teach endurance and attention to detail. Learning labor is learning survival. Even mundane, repetitive tasks carry significance. Mending a roof, sharpening a sickle, or stacking firewood are exercises in foresight and planning. Neglect leads to disaster. The rhythm of daily life is not arbitrary. It is a system of checks and balances designed to sustain the household against environmental pressures, economic demands, and social obligations. And yet, despite careful scheduling and relentless effort, a question remains. If every day is consumed by labor, governed by the cycles of the land and the demands of survival, how do households endure the physical and emotional strain? And what happens when misfortune disrupts even the most meticulously maintained rhythm? As you move through the days and weeks of medieval life, you realize that labor is never only about survival, it is deeply entwined with social obligations, communal identity, and spiritual rhythm. Work is both practical and symbolic, and the structure of the week, month, and year reflects centuries of adaptation to environment, authority, and faith. The 7-day week is punctuated by cycles of obligation and respite. Sunday is set aside for rest and worship. Even in the harshest circumstances, attending Mass or observing prayer is expected. Labor may pause briefly, but even then, tasks such as tending animals or ensuring firewood for cooking continue quietly. Religious observance and labor coexist, framing time in ways that go beyond utility. Work is measured not only by productivity, but by adherence to social and spiritual rhythm. Communal labor is as important as individual effort. Villagers are bound together by obligations imposed by the Lord, by necessity, and by custom. Roads must be repaired, fences rebuilt, barns maintained. Work parties form naturally, with households pooling effort to complete tasks too large for one family. Cooperation ensures survival. It also reinforces social bonds and shared responsibility. Those who shirk duties risk fines, social disapproval, or even violence. Labor is an instrument of cohesion, as much as subsistence. Seasonal festivals structure labor in more subtle ways. Planting, harvesting, and religious holidays punctuate work with moments of pause or celebration. Spring rituals mark the sowing of crops. Harvest festivals honor the land's yield. These events provide rare opportunities for communal gathering, feasting, and reflection. Work is interrupted, but its purpose is reaffirmed. Labor serves the household, the village, and through ritual, the divine. Even exhaustion and hardship are framed as meaningful within these rhythms. Work is also gendered and generational. Adults, children, and the elderly have distinct responsibilities, though all contribute to survival. Men may plow or perform heavy labor. Women tend animals, process food, spin or mend clothing, and children assist wherever possible. Tasks are allocated according to strength, skill, and necessity, creating a balanced system where the survival of the household depends on coordinated effort. Everyone is essential. Idleness is a risk the household cannot afford. Tools mediate not only the physical labor but the social structure. A plow or scythe defines who works where and how. Mastery of tools is a form of authority within the household and village. Apprenticeship and observation transmit practical knowledge from generation to generation. Mistakes are instructive. A poorly driven plow damages fields. A dull sickle slows harvest. Labor teaches discipline, foresight, and coordination, embedding survival knowledge in both body and mind. Even rest is structured and purposeful. Meals are brief but communal. Firewood is rotated efficiently, and sleep is timed to maximize energy for labor. Children may wake early to help, elders may rise later, and everyone adjusts to the changing demands of season, weather, and social obligation. The household operates like a machine, each member a vital component, each action interdependent. Rest is recovery, not indulgence. Efficiency and endurance govern daily life. Labor rhythms are closely tied to environmental cycles. Frost, drought, flooding, and storms demand rapid adaptation. Delays in sowing, harvesting, or repair can jeopardize survival for months. Observation, memory, and local knowledge are essential. Which soils drain quickly, which fields flood easily, and which crops mature fastest in the region. Labor is thus not only physical but intellectual, requiring constant calculation and foresight. Work is also intertwined with scarcity and resource management. Grain must be harvested, stored, and rationed. Animals fed, milked, and preserved. Every action affects survival. Oversight, vigilance, and planning are ongoing. A lapse can cascade into weeks of hardship. The rhythm of labor structures life, but life itself is fragile, requiring constant attention and effort to maintain balance. And as the weeks, months, and seasons unfold, a question lingers. If survival depends on precise coordination of labor, rest, ritual, and communal cooperation, how resilient are households when famine, disease, or social disruption strike? How do families sustain these rhythms when the very structure of daily life is threatened? Even the most disciplined household cannot control everything. The rhythms of labor are fragile, easily disrupted by weather, disease, famine, or political demands. A sudden drought dries fields, a storm destroys stored grain, or an outbreak of illness incapacitates laborers. The carefully maintained balance of work, rest, and ritual is thrown into chaos, forcing households to adapt or perish. Survival in the medieval village is not only about effort, but about resilience in the face of unpredictability. When crops fail, labor must be reprioritized. Plowing, sowing, or weeding may be delayed, shortened, or abandoned entirely. Repair work may be neglected, storage systems compromised, and animal husbandry adjusted to reflect limited resources. Decisions are strategic, which labor is essential, which can wait, and which is futile. Every choice has consequences, both immediate and long-term. Life becomes a constant negotiation between necessity and risk. Disease magnifies vulnerability. Illness among adults reduces labor capacity dramatically. Children, elderly, or those spared illness may be forced into heavier workloads, while care must be provided to the sick. Mortality rates rise, and households may be unable to meet obligations to lords or neighbors. Labor rhythms are fractured, and survival becomes a complex calculus of prioritizing human and material resources. A single epidemic can ripple across a village, altering social, economic, and practical structures. Social obligations do not pause for misfortune. Lords still demand labor for roads, fields, and projects. Taxes must still be paid, and communal responsibilities continue. Failure to fulfill duties can result in fines, confiscation of goods, or legal penalties. The household must balance survival needs against these external pressures, negotiating with authority and managing relationships. Labor is never purely domestic. It exists within a web of obligations that extend beyond the household. Yet adaptation is constant. Villagers develop strategies to cope with disruption. Labor may be redistributed among family members, tasks sequenced differently, or tools repurposed for efficiency. Surplus food may be shared or traded to mitigate scarcity. Communities rally, pooling resources and labor to maintain essential functions. The rhythm of labor is resilient precisely because it is flexible, able to absorb shocks without collapsing entirely. Ritual and spiritual practice provide structure during chaos. Prayer, blessings, and observances reinforce continuity and morale. Even when hunger gnaws or labor is impossible, maintaining rituals signals stability and collective identity. Work is not only physical, it is social and symbolic. The acts of labor, rest, and devotion are intertwined, reinforcing endurance and resilience across generations. Tools and skill remain central. A well-maintained plow, a sharp sickle, or a repaired roof can mitigate disaster. Knowledge of repair, cultivation, and storage is as crucial as raw labor. Experience informs strategy. When storms threaten, you secure grain. When labor is scarce, tasks are prioritized. Mastery of tools and adaptation of techniques are survival mechanisms. The material culture of the household, the implements, storage containers, and domestic structures supports endurance. Children and apprentices absorb lessons in resilience through observation and participation. They learn that labor is cyclical, fragile, and negotiable. They see adaptation in action, a family shifting harvest priorities, repurposing tools, or improvising meals. Practical knowledge, transmitted this way, is the backbone of household survival. Education is hands-on, immediate, and inseparable from lived experience. Ultimately, the medieval household survives not through abundance but through disciplined adaptation. The rhythms of labor, rest, and ritual create a structure that supports life, but they are never absolute. Flexibility, foresight, cooperation, and endurance are as critical as strength or skill. The daily work of survival is a choreography of effort, social obligation, and adaptation, performed against a backdrop of uncertainty. And as you reflect on these patterns, one thought persists. If the survival of medieval households depended on such delicate balance between labor and rest, obligation and adaptation, skill and endurance, what happened when repeated crises, environmental changes, or political pressures destabilized even the most resilient communities? How did ordinary people endure when the rhythm of life itself was broken? And what lessons does this offer about the human capacity to adapt under relentless pressure? Story 9. Walls and Hearths, the Architecture of Peasant Life. You wake each morning in a space that is both fragile and essential. The peasant home is more than shelter. It is a nexus of survival, labor, and family life. Walls, roof, hearth, and floor are constructed from whatever materials the village provides: timber, wattle and daub, straw, mud, and stone. Luxury is minimal. The house must protect you from wind, rain, snow, and cold, while also accommodating work, food storage, and daily life. Every plank, beam, and thatch bundle is a calculated investment in endurance. The typical peasant house is small, often a single room divided by function rather than walls. The hearth dominates, serving as both stove and heat source. Smoke escapes through gaps in the roof or a simple flue, leaving the interior filled with the smell of wood smoke and cooking. You learn to manage heat carefully. Too little fire and the cold seeps into bones. Too much, and the thatch may ignite. Cooking, warmth, and social life revolve around this central point. Walls are constructed from locally available materials. Timber frames provide structure, infilled with wattle-woven sticks and daub mud mixed with straw. In regions with stone, foundations or full walls may be built, but stone is labor-intensive and often reserved for wealthier households. Insulation is minimal. You rely on thick clothing, rushes on the floor, and additional bedding for warmth. Drafts are constant companions, yet the home is a sanctuary from storms, frost, and predators. Roofs are equally pragmatic. Thatched roofs are common, layered carefully to shed rain and snow. They must be repaired regularly. Missing patches allow water to seep in, damaging walls, floors, and stored goods. Roof maintenance is labor-intensive, often a communal task, with neighbors assisting in exchange for future help. The roof is both protection and labor commitment, a constant reminder that shelter is never static, never fully finished. Storage is central to household architecture. Grain is kept in raised bins to protect against rodents and damp. Tools and implements are stored along walls or hung from beams. Food preservation and security are integral to the design. Every plank, shelf, or hook serves multiple purposes, keeping supplies safe, maintaining order, and maximizing limited space. The architecture of the house is inseparable from the survival strategies of its inhabitants. Windows are rare, often simple openings covered with oiled cloth, horn, or wooden shutters. Light is minimal, and air circulation is controlled to balance warmth against smoke accumulation. Interior spaces are dim, shaped by practical necessity rather than comfort. You learn to live in low light, to recognize objects and movements by touch and habit, and to coordinate household labor around limited visibility. Floors are typically dirt, sometimes covered with rushes, straw, or wooden planks. They are functional, easy to repair, and provide insulation. Cleaning is constant, especially near the hearth or animal pens. Every sweep or replacement of straw maintains hygiene and comfort, reducing pests and disease. The floor is a living surface, bearing the weight of work, meals, and family life. Peasant homes are multi-purpose. Cooking, sleeping, tool repair, weaving, animal husbandry, and storage all occur under one roof. Privacy is minimal. Labor and domestic life are intertwined. Even children share space with adults, learning through observation and participation. Household architecture reflects the realities of survival, compact, functional, and adaptive. Community architecture also shapes individual life. Proximity to neighbors, roads, and communal resources is vital. Wells, communal ovens, and livestock pens are shared. Defense may be minimal, but the village layout prioritizes access to food, water, and labor networks. Your home exists within a web of interdependence, connecting private survival to communal structures. Even subtle details are meaningful. Door height, roof pitch, hearth placement, and storage elevation all affect daily life. Adaptations respond to climate, available materials, and labor availability. The house is a living system, constantly maintained, repaired, and adjusted. Neglect has immediate consequences. Leaks, rot, cold, or vermin can threaten survival. A home is both a refuge and a responsibility, a tangible embodiment of labor, skill, and endurance. And yet, despite careful construction and maintenance, one thought lingers. If survival depends so intimately on the integrity of walls, roofs, and hearths, what happens when disaster strikes, storms, fire, or war, and the very shelter that sustains life is destroyed? How do households endure when the walls meant to protect them fail, and what strategies emerge to rebuild and survive? A peasant home is never complete. It is a constant project, requiring daily attention, seasonal maintenance, and long-term adaptation. Every structural element, the roof, walls, floor, and hearth, demands vigilance. A neglected roof allows rain to seep through, rotting beams and spoiling stored grain. A cracked wall invites drafts, weakening both comfort and health. Maintenance is not optional. It is as critical to survival as food or labor. Seasonal repairs dominate much of the household calendar. Spring brings roof inspection, patching thatch or repairing tiles before the rains arrive. Summer allows the drying of daub and repair of fences, while autumn focuses on preparing storage for the winter's grain. Winter, though harsh, may be spent mending tools, sewing clothing, or reinforcing structures with spare timber or mud. Each season imposes tasks that align with environmental constraints, integrating architecture into the natural rhythms of life. Tools are extensions of household maintenance. Hammers, saws, trowels, and knives allow the peasant to repair, reinforce, and adapt. Skills in carpentry, masonry, and thatching are essential, often transmitted from parent to child. Mastery is practical rather than formal. Mistakes have immediate consequences. A poorly repaired roof may leak, a weak floor may collapse under weight, and a crooked beam may threaten the hearth's stability. Knowledge is embedded in repetition, observation, and trial and error. Resource scarcity shapes construction and repair. Timber may be scarce, mud and straw must be rationed, and stone may require negotiation with neighbors or lords. Every material is carefully conserved and reused. Broken tools or worn-out beams are repurposed. Ingenuity is constant. A missing plank becomes a patch. A worn roof thatch is reinforced rather than replaced. The household's survival is intertwined with material resourcefulness. The hearth is the focal point of domestic life and a continuous maintenance challenge. Cooking, heating, and light depend on its function. Smoke must escape, firewood must be managed, and the hearth structure must remain sound. Families develop strategies for efficiency. Small, contained fires reduce fuel use. Ashes are collected and used as fertilizer. Embers are preserved for quick reignition. The hearth is simultaneously practical, social, and symbolic, a constant center of labor and family cohesion. Architecture also mediates social interaction and labor distribution. Space within the home is allocated according to function and hierarchy. Adults sleep in one area, children in another. Food is stored near the hearth. Tools hang along walls or beams. Space is optimized for survival. The house is multifunctional, accommodating work, food preparation, sleep, and storage within a limited footprint. These spatial arrangements reflect practical considerations rather than comfort, shaping daily routines and relationships. Village layout reinforces household architecture. Proximity to neighbors, wells, communal ovens, and pastures ensures efficiency and security. Collaboration is frequent. Thatching may be performed as a group, fences built collectively, and firewood gathered in communal parties. Architecture is not isolated. It is embedded within a network of social and labor relations. The survival of one household is connected to the functioning of the community. Adaptation is constant. Houses evolve over time to meet changing needs, resources, and environmental pressures. Additions may be built, floors reinforced, storage expanded, and roofs redesigned. These modifications are cumulative, reflecting the household's experience and priorities. Architecture, in this sense, is a living record of endurance, skill, and adaptation. Yet, despite all care, vulnerability is ever present. Fire, flood, storm, or war can render a household homeless in an instant. The work invested in maintenance may be destroyed in a single event. Survival then depends on preparation, resilience, and the ability to rebuild using knowledge, skill, and community support. The house is both shelter and test of endurance, a fragile stage on which daily life unfolds. And as you consider the careful labor that sustains walls, hearths, and roofs, one question emerges. When disaster strikes and the structures that safeguard survival fail, how do households rebuild, adapt, and continue? What does this reveal about the ingenuity and resilience of ordinary people whose lives depend on the fragile architecture of survival? Even the most carefully maintained peasant home cannot withstand every hazard. Fire, storms, flooding, or human conflict can destroy shelter in an instant. Yet survival does not end with destruction. Adaptation, ingenuity, and community support become critical. The peasant household is less a static structure than a dynamic ecosystem, constantly repaired, reinforced, and rebuilt to meet the demands of life in an unpredictable world. When disaster strikes, priorities are immediate and practical. Food, tools, and livestock must be secured first. Grain is moved to higher ground, animals herded to safety, and essential tools salvaged. The hearth, often destroyed or damaged, is rebuilt as a first step in restoring domestic function. Every action is a calculation. What must be preserved, what can be sacrificed, and what can be reconstructed later. Survival demands rapid assessment and decisive labor. Reconstruction relies on both skill and resourcefulness. Timber, mud, straw, and stone are gathered and repurposed. Knowledge of building techniques is essential. You must understand how to weave wattle, mix daub, thatch a roof, or reinforce a floor. Even small mistakes can compromise safety or longevity. Practical knowledge is tested under pressure. The ability to rebuild swiftly is as critical as the labor itself. Every repaired wall and rethatched roof is evidence of accumulated skill and experience. Community support is indispensable. Villagers often aid each other after fires or floods, contributing labor, materials, or expertise. Mutual aid strengthens bonds and ensures collective survival. The social dimension of architecture becomes clear. A household's resilience depends not only on its members, but on the network of relationships and reciprocal obligations within the village. Cooperation transforms individual vulnerability into communal endurance. Architecture is adaptive. Reconstructed homes often incorporate improvements learned from prior disasters. A thatch roof may be layered more thickly, walls reinforced with stone, storage elevated to prevent flooding. Houses evolve in response to environmental knowledge and practical experience. These incremental changes reflect a household's capacity for learning and adaptation, embedding survival strategies directly into the built environment. The interior of the home remains multifunctional. Cooking, sleeping, weaving, animal care, and storage continue under the same roof, though layouts may shift after reconstruction. Space is optimized to accommodate changing household size, labor demands, or available resources. Children participate in repairs and adjustments, internalizing skills and knowledge essential for future survival. The home is both a workplace and classroom, a hub where practical and social knowledge converge. Hearths, central to domestic life, are rebuilt and maintained with care. They are the locus of cooking, warmth, and family cohesion. Fires are managed to maximize heat efficiency, preserve embers for future use, and prevent accidents. Ashes may be repurposed as fertilizer. The hearth embodies the intersection of labor, survival, and ingenuity. Its reconstruction after disaster is symbolic. Life endures, and the household continues. Architecture reflects hierarchy and adaptation. Improvements often signal skill, experience, or resource availability. Larger homes, better insulation, or reinforced structures may indicate a household's resilience or social connections. Even within modest means, adaptation showcases human ingenuity. The built environment encodes knowledge, labor, and survival strategies, silently documenting the life of ordinary people. Ultimately, the peasant home is a testament to resilience. Walls, roofs, floors, and hearths are more than shelter. They are physical manifestations of labor, knowledge, and adaptation. Survival is maintained through constant attention, skillful reconstruction, and cooperative networks. The medieval household functions as an ecosystem, integrating material resources, labor, social bonds, and environmental understanding into a system capable of withstanding adversity. And as you reflect on the persistence of households through fire, flood, and decay, one thought emerges. The endurance of ordinary people was built as much on practical knowledge, communal cooperation, and adaptability as on any physical structure. How remarkable, then, that these fragile walls and humble hearths sustained life, labor, and culture for generations, despite the constant threat of collapse that loomed over every corner of the medieval world. Story 10. Illness, Healing, and Hygiene, Surviving Disease in the Village. You wake to a new day, knowing that illness is as much a part of life as work, food, or the seasons. In a medieval village, disease is constant and unpredictable. Fever, dysentery, respiratory infections, parasites, and injuries shape daily existence. Survival is never guaranteed. Even minor ailments can become serious, especially for children, the elderly, or those already weakened by hunger or hard labor. Health is precarious, and knowledge of care is practical, empirical, and often passed down orally. Hygiene is limited by environment and resources. Access to clean water is uneven. Wells may be communal, rivers are used for washing, and bathing is infrequent, often seasonal. Clothes are washed sparingly. Lice, fleas, and other parasites are common companions. The household must constantly balance cleanliness against labor demands, scarcity of fuel, and seasonal weather. A simple act like washing hands or rinsing clothes is not just domestic maintenance, it is survival. Nutrition and labor influence vulnerability. Inadequate food weakens the body, making it susceptible to infection. Exhaustion from field work, long hours of toil, and poor shelter all contribute to physical stress. A minor injury, cut, burn, or broken limb can become life-threatening if infection sets in. Daily life is a negotiation between exertion and protection. Every wound and fatigue counts. Medical knowledge is practical but rudimentary. Local remedies dominate: herbs, poultices, infusions, and diet adjustments. Villagers rely on midwives, elders, and those with experience in healing. Treatments are empirical and tested over generations. Some are effective, others less so. Humoral theory and superstition intermingle with observation. Decisions about care are critical. When to treat a wound, when to rest, when to call for external help, and when to rely on prayer or ritual. Children are particularly vulnerable. Their smaller bodies, developing immune systems, and frequent exposure to work in communal spaces increase the risk of disease. Households adapt by assigning less hazardous tasks, isolating the sick, or carefully rationing food and warmth. Yet mortality remains high, and the loss of even one child can affect household labor, inheritance, and emotional stability. Every family negotiates risk and precaution constantly. Communal life introduces further risk. Shared wells, markets, and barns are vectors for infection. Seasonal gatherings, festivals, or labor parties expose villagers to pathogens from distant regions. Movement of people and goods, while essential for survival, increases exposure to disease. Villagers balance these risks against economic necessity and social obligations, making strategic decisions about when to travel, when to gather, and how to protect vulnerable members. Preventive practices are limited but ingrained. Quarantine is informal, based on observation rather than official edict. Sick individuals may be isolated, herbs burned, or prayers offered. Households monitor symptoms closely, often employing intuitive judgment about contagiousness. Observation of neighbors, livestock, and seasonal patterns informs decision-making. Knowledge is situational, acquired through experience rather than instruction. The role of midwives and healers is central. Midwives attend births, manage minor injuries, and offer herbal remedies. Local healers may be consulted for persistent illness, drawing on a mixture of plant knowledge, humoral theory, and ritual. Success is unpredictable, but these figures are critical lifelines. They provide expertise, guidance, and reassurance in a world where professional medicine is inaccessible. Sanitation, or the lack thereof, magnifies vulnerability. Waste disposal is primitive. Latrines are rare or rudimentary, and animal excrement is common within domestic spaces. Flies, vermin, and contaminated water serve as vectors for disease. Households develop coping strategies separating waste, burning refuse, or relocating animals, but environmental hazards are pervasive. Survival depends on vigilance, adaptation, and experience. Even minor diseases can disrupt labor rhythms. Fever, fatigue, or injury reduces capacity to perform critical tasks, tending animals, harvesting crops, or repairing structures. Household management must adjust quickly, redistributing labor and resources. Illness is both a personal and collective challenge. It threatens food security, household stability, and community obligations simultaneously. And as you consider the fragility of health in the medieval village, one question remains. If daily survival hinges not only on food, labor, and shelter, but also on the constant threat of disease, how do households endure repeated sickness? And what strategies emerge to protect lives when knowledge, resources, and medical care are limited? As illness weaves itself into daily life, the medieval household becomes a center of care, improvisation, and medical knowledge. With professional physicians scarce and hospitals mostly distant, villagers rely on a combination of herbal remedies, observation, tradition, and prayer to protect themselves and their families. Health is managed at home, often with little more than intuition, experience, and the occasional guidance of local healers or midwives. Herbal medicine dominates treatment. Chamomile, sage, rosemary, thyme, and nettle are common ingredients. Each plant has a purpose. Chamomile soothes fevers, sage disinfects wounds, nettles supplement nutrition. Knowledge of plants is practical, learned through observation and handed down orally. Mistakes are costly. Wrong plants or incorrect dosages can worsen illness. Households maintain small herb gardens or collect from nearby fields, ensuring a steady supply for both food and medicine. The landscape itself is a pharmacy, and survival depends on knowing its secrets. Midwives and elder women play a central role in care. Beyond assisting childbirth, they manage fevers, infections, and injuries. Their expertise is highly practical, knowing which herbs to apply, how to make poultices, or when to alter diet. They also observe and diagnose patterns of symptoms, drawing from experience rather than theory. The midwife or local healer becomes the household's first line of defense against sickness. Their skill is vital, especially for vulnerable populations, infants, children, and the elderly. Ritual and prayer complement practical remedies. Religious devotion is interwoven with healing practices. Prayers, blessings, charms, and pilgrimages may be employed alongside herbal treatments. Some households rely on saints, intercession for protection or recovery. Illness is understood both as a physical condition and as part of a moral, spiritual, or cosmic order. Healing is thus an integration of observation, experience, and faith. Diet and nutrition are treated as both preventive and curative measures. Food is medicine. Broths, pottage, and herbal infusions are given to the sick to restore strength and prevent deterioration. The preparation of food is carefully managed to ensure digestibility and nourishment. Grain, vegetables, and limited animal products are combined to maximize calories and healing potential. What you eat and how it is prepared can influence your recovery as much as any external remedy. Hygiene, though limited, is essential. Households attempt to separate clean spaces from contaminated areas, remove waste, and manage water quality when possible. Animals are kept in designated areas, cooking implements are cleaned, floors swept. While rudimentary, these practices reduce exposure to pathogens. Knowledge of hygiene is empirical. Lessons are learned from observing illness, and it's spread rather than formal instruction. Isolation is practiced intuitively. Sick individuals may be confined to a corner of the home or to a small separate space when possible. Families observe symptoms carefully, noting when fever or infection threatens others. Community gatherings are limited during outbreaks, with neighbors exercising caution. Even without formal quarantine, these strategies slow the spread of disease. Adaptation is learned from experience, observation, and communal memory. Children participate in care and learn essential skills. From an early age, they assist in preparing poultices, fetching water, tending the fire, and observing treatment. Knowledge is transmitted through doing, observation, repetition, and correction. These practices prepare the next generation to manage both illness and daily survival. Survival depends on the continuity of practical knowledge. Illness also alters labor. A sick adult cannot plow, mend tools, or tend animals. Household members redistribute tasks, adjusting workloads to maintain essential functions. Children may assume heavier responsibilities, while neighbors may offer assistance. Disease is both personal and collective, shaping daily schedules, labor distribution, and social obligations. Every illness is a negotiation between survival, care, and productivity. And as you observe the interplay of herbal remedies, faith, hygiene, and labor, one question emerges. When resources are scarce, knowledge is limited, and disease is relentless, how do households endure repeated sickness? How do ordinary people protect life and labor when every illness threatens not just one individual, but the stability and survival of the entire household? Illness in the medieval village is not merely an individual concern. It reverberates through the household and community, shaping daily life, labor, and social bonds. Survival depends not only on remedies, but also on adaptation, cooperation, and the collective knowledge that allows ordinary people to endure repeated threats to life and productivity. The interplay of health, labor, and social structure defines how households function under persistent vulnerability. When disease strikes, households respond strategically. Food, water, and warmth are prioritized for the sick. Labor is redistributed. Children may take on more work. Neighbors may assist with harvests or repairs, and elders may provide guidance. Each action balances immediate survival against long-term productivity. Illness becomes a test of household organization, resilience, and knowledge of both medicine and labor management. Community networks play a vital role. Villagers share herbal remedies, knowledge of symptoms, and practical advice. Midwives and local healers act as nodes of expertise, circulating critical information about effective treatments or emerging threats. During epidemics, cooperation intensifies. Neighbors may provide food, assist in care, or help bury the dead. Survival is collective as much as it is personal. No household exists in isolation. Adaptation extends to preventive strategies. Seasonal patterns of disease inform behavior. Water sources are selected carefully. Communal gatherings may be limited, and hygiene practices are reinforced during outbreaks. Knowledge of local medicinal plants, their preparation, and proper use becomes a form of insurance. Practical experience observing who recovers and who succumbs shapes future decision-making. Villagers develop empirically tested routines to minimize risk. Household design and domestic practice also affect resilience. Spaces are organized to manage exposure. Sleeping areas may be separated, storage elevated, and the hearth maintained for heat and sanitation. Ventilation, cleaning, and waste management reduce risk. Even simple actions, boiling water, washing bedding, or moving animals can influence outcomes. The home is both a site of vulnerability and a tool for mitigation. Spiritual and ritual practices continue to complement physical care. Prayer, blessings, and observances reinforce morale and provide psychological support. Healing is understood holistically. Body, mind, and spirit are interconnected. Ritual acts, burning herbs, invoking saints, or reciting prayers offer a sense of control in an unpredictable world. Faith, alongside practical skill, strengthens resilience. Children learn early the delicate balance of labor, care, and precaution. They assist in preparing remedies, tending the sick, and observing symptoms. Knowledge is hands-on and immediate. Watching, imitating, and participating ensures continuity of skill. Survival depends on passing down practical wisdom across generations. Education is inseparable from daily life, labor, and the rhythms of health. Even when illness strikes repeatedly, households endure. Experience teaches prioritization, early intervention, and adaptive labor distribution. The social fabric, the cooperation of neighbors, the guidance of elders, the skill of midwives reinforces survival. Recovery is not just physical. It is also social, restoring labor capacity, household stability, and communal bonds. Health is inseparable from relationships, and the collective knowledge embedded in village life. Ultimately, surviving disease in the medieval village is a testament to human resilience. Households adapt constantly, integrating empirical medicine, spiritual practice, labor adjustment, and community support. Every recovery is a negotiation of knowledge, skill, and social cooperation. Ordinary people survive not through the certainty of medicine, but through the relentless application of observation, labor, and communal resourcefulness. And as you reflect on these patterns, one thought persists. When health is precarious, knowledge limited, and disease relentless, survival depends as much on cooperation, observation, and adaptation as on remedies themselves. How extraordinary, then, that medieval households not only endured repeated illness, but continued to sustain labor, culture, and community in the face of constant threat. Story 11. Clothing, craft, and comfort, dressing for survival. You rise before dawn, pulling on garments that are functional rather than fashionable. In the medieval village, clothing is not a statement, it is survival. Every item serves a practical purpose: warmth, protection, modesty, and durability. Fabric is scarce, labor-intensive to produce, and must withstand constant wear. Each stitch, seam, and repair is evidence of ingenuity and necessity. Peasant clothing is made primarily from wool, linen, and less frequently hemp. Wool provides warmth and durability, crucial for cold winters and damp conditions. Linen is lighter and more breathable, often used for undergarments or shirts. Fabrics are hand-spun and hand-woven, a process that consumes immense labor. A single garment may represent weeks or even months of work. The time invested ensures that clothing lasts for years, undergoing constant repair and adaptation. Garments are simple in construction, often tunics for both men and women, with variations in length or layering to accommodate gender, age, or status. Sleeves, hoods, and cloaks serve multiple purposes, shielding against rain, providing warmth, and protecting laborers from sun or wind. Belts and ties secure garments for physical work. Practicality dominates. Decoration is minimal, reserved for the wealthy or festive occasions. Function is survival. Adornment is secondary. Footwear is essential yet rudimentary. Simple leather shoes, wooden clogs, or sandals protect feet from injury, frostbite, and disease. Leather is tanned by local artisans, often using household resources like ash, bark, or urine in the process. Repairs are constant. Soles are replaced, seams reinforced, and holes patched. Barefoot walking is risky, as thorns, mud, and uneven ground threaten both health and productivity. Every step is mediated by the availability and quality of footwear. Layering is critical. Cold weather demands multiple layers: tunics, cloaks, hoods, and wrapped leg coverings. Heat, activity, and changing conditions require adjustment. Wool, linen, and fur are combined to create a flexible system of insulation. Layers are repaired and patched repeatedly. Even worn scraps are repurposed for children's garments or as insulation. Clothing is dynamic, changing with both environmental needs and available materials. Clothing maintenance dominates household labor. Washing, mending, and dyeing are ongoing tasks. Wool and linen are washed carefully, often outdoors in rivers or streams. Repairs are performed with needle and thread, sometimes incorporating patches from older garments. Dyeing, when possible, uses natural sources: madder for red, woad for blue, and various plants for muted shades of brown or yellow. Even limited color provides psychological comfort, distinguishing households or marking special occasions. Children's clothing is frequently hand-me-downs or patched older garments. Durability is prioritized over appearance. Growth is rapid, meaning constant adjustments, resizing, or repurposing are necessary. Young laborers need protection as much as their elders. Clothing is both protective layer and symbol of household resourcefulness. Social signaling exists but is subtle. Differentiation between peasant households and wealthier villagers may appear in fabric quality, cleanliness, or layering, but functionality is still the priority. Even small displays, clean seams, patched repairs, or brighter cloth communicate diligence, care, and respectability within the constraints of survival. Clothing carries both practical and social meaning, even in modest circumstances. The labor to produce garments is immense. Spinning, weaving, sewing, and dyeing demand time, skill, and attention. Each process is interwoven with survival. Spinning is often done during idle hours, weaving may take weeks, and mending is continuous. The household coordinates clothing production alongside food preparation, shelter maintenance, and field labor. Time is a scarce resource, and clothing is a central focus of domestic planning. Even modest adornments, laces, embroidery, or small decorative knots have significance. They mark life events, a child's coming of age, a festive gathering, or a religious holiday. Such details are rare and labor-intensive but provide a sense of identity and continuity. Clothing is therefore not purely functional. It embodies culture, labor, and resilience. And as you consider the daily labor of spinning, weaving, patching, and layering, one question emerges. When clothing is both protection and necessity, labor-intensive to produce, and constantly repaired under conditions of scarcity, how do households maintain dignity, comfort, and survival simultaneously? How do ordinary people ensure warmth, modesty, and practicality when every stitch carries the weight of life itself? The life of a peasant is inseparable from the labor required to make, maintain, and adapt clothing. Production is a household endeavor, involving spinning, weaving, sewing, and sometimes dyeing. Every garment is both an investment of time and a tool of survival, and the household's ability to clothe its members effectively reflects its resilience and resourcefulness. Spinning is the first step. Raw wool or flax is carded, cleaned, and twisted into thread using a drop spindle or distaff. This is a repetitive, time-consuming task, often performed by women during idle hours at home or near the hearth. The speed and quality of spinning directly influence weaving and sewing efficiency. Thread that is too coarse or uneven produces garments prone to tearing, while fine, consistent thread produces more durable clothing. Patience, precision, and skill are essential. Weaving transforms thread into fabric. Looms vary in complexity, but most village households rely on simple, vertical looms. Weaving requires both skill and attention, as tension, pattern, and alignment affect durability. Even a small mistake can render a piece of cloth less functional or require repair. Fabric production is seasonal, often performed during winter months when field work is minimal. Time management is crucial. Enough cloth must be prepared for garments, repairs, and household needs throughout the year. Sewing and repair are constant. Stitches must be tight and neat to prevent wear, and patches must be carefully applied to extend the life of garments. Even small scraps of old clothing are salvaged, cut, and repurposed for children or minor protective layers. Needles are precious, and broken thread is salvaged whenever possible. Repair is not cosmetic, it is survival. Households learn to balance urgency, skill, and material limitations in every stitch. Dyeing, while less frequent for peasant clothing, provides both utility and identity. Natural dyes from plants, roots, and bark allow for color differentiation, though bright colors are rare. Blues from woad, reds from madder, and yellows from weld or saffron provide subtle variety. Color is secondary to warmth and durability, but can communicate care, festivity, or status within the community. Even small amounts of dye require careful preparation and timing to avoid wasting precious fabric. Resource management is critical. Wool, linen, thread, and leather are valuable and often scarce. Families must ration raw materials, repair existing garments, and plan ahead for seasonal needs. Clothing scraps are reused. Worn-out items become patches, children's clothing, or insulation. Nothing is discarded lightly. Survival depends on careful allocation, strategic reuse, and ingenuity in stretching materials as far as possible. Labor for clothing production intersects with other household tasks. While spinning or sewing, women may supervise children, tend fires, or prepare meals. Work is layered and multitasked, reflecting the continuous interplay of labor, survival, and domestic management. Efficiency is vital. Each task competes with others for limited time and energy. The household functions as an integrated system, with clothing production central to its operation. Children are trained early. They learn to spin, weave, and sew by observing and assisting adults. Simple tasks, such as tying knots, threading needles, or patching small tears, prepare them for eventual responsibility. Knowledge is transmitted experientially, embedded in daily routines rather than formal instruction. Clothing production is therefore both practical and educational, a continuous apprenticeship in survival. Weather and environment also shape clothing practices. Wet, cold, or muddy conditions demand heavier, layered clothing, reinforced footwear, and careful maintenance. Seasonal rotation of garments ensures warmth in winter and comfort in summer. Repairs must often be performed quickly after storms or floods. Clothing is dynamic, responding to both immediate environmental pressures and long-term survival needs. Even modest clothing can carry cultural meaning. Decorative elements, however subtle, mark family identity, festivals, or religious observances. Small embroidery, patterns in stitching, or repurposed colored threads create visual cues that extend beyond mere survival. Clothing thus becomes both functional and symbolic, intertwining protection, labor, and identity. And as you reflect on the ongoing labor of spinning, weaving, mending, and dyeing, a question arises. If clothing is essential for warmth, protection, and modesty, and requires continuous, labor-intensive effort, how do households adapt to material scarcity, environmental challenges, and the wear of daily life, all while maintaining dignity and survival? Clothing in the medieval village is more than fabric stitched together. It is a record of adaptation, resourcefulness, and resilience. Every garment tells a story of survival. The wool spun from a local sheep, the linen woven from homegrown flax, the patch carefully sewn from an older garment. The household's skill in clothing production reflects its ability to endure, improvise, and transmit knowledge across generations. When resources are scarce, ingenuity becomes essential. Scraps of old cloth are transformed into new garments or insulating layers. Worn-out wool may be unraveled and respun, blending fibers for extra warmth or durability. Children's garments are frequently resized from older siblings' clothing. Even small tools like needles or awls are meticulously maintained to maximize their utility. Survival is embedded in creativity, and clothing is both a practical and intellectual exercise in resourcefulness. Environmental challenges further shape clothing practices. Winters are harsh, summers humid, and storms frequent. Layering, patching, and seasonal rotation allow households to protect themselves against fluctuating conditions. Repairs are often performed immediately after damage occurs, preventing minor problems from escalating into major threats to survival. Clothing is thus a dynamic system, constantly adapted to meet both environmental and household needs. Community networks are critical. Households exchange textiles, assist with mending, and share knowledge about weaving, dyeing, and repair techniques. Midwives, elders, and experienced women serve as informal instructors, passing practical wisdom to younger generations. Festivals or communal gatherings offer opportunities to trade fabrics or display skills, reinforcing social bonds while addressing practical necessities. Clothing production is simultaneously a domestic and communal activity. Even modest clothing carries cultural and symbolic weight. Embroidery, patch patterns, and small decorative touches mark personal or family identity. Festival clothing, though rare, allows villagers to participate in shared cultural rituals, connecting labor, survival, and social cohesion. Clothing is thus a medium through which households negotiate individuality, social norms, and communal belonging. Survival is practical, but culture persists through garments. Children learn early through participation. By spinning, weaving, sewing, and mending alongside adults, they absorb both practical skills and an understanding of household economy. Education is hands-on, observation, repetition, and incremental mastery. Clothing becomes both a protective layer and a vehicle for transmitting knowledge, ensuring continuity of survival strategies across generations. Maintenance is never-ending. Wool garments must be washed, repaired, and stored carefully. Linen must be protected from moisture. Leather footwear requires conditioning. Each season introduces new challenges. Winter demands insulation and layering, while summer requires lighter garments and care against wear. The household constantly negotiates labor, materials, and time to maintain functionality. Efficiency is critical. Failure can compromise both survival and comfort. Ingenuity extends to repurposing and improvisation. Old sacks, torn sheets, or worn clothing are transformed into quilts, patches, or protective wraps. Even a single garment may serve multiple functions. Tunics become overcoats, scarves protect heads and hands, and belts secure both clothing and tools. Flexibility in use and design allows households to adapt to scarcity, environmental hazards, and the wear of daily life. Ultimately, clothing is a reflection of the medieval household's ingenuity, resilience, and cultural continuity. The labor invested in every stitch, the knowledge embedded in every repair, and the adaptation to environmental and material constraints all converge to sustain life. Garments are not merely functional, they are tools of survival, expressions of identity, and tangible evidence of human resourcefulness in a challenging world. And as you consider the persistence of spinning, weaving, repairing, and adapting over years and generations, one question lingers. In a world where every garment is a labor of survival, how did ordinary people maintain dignity, identity, and continuity of culture when scarcity, environmental hazards, and the demands of daily life constantly threatened both their clothing and their very lives?